the flames, the burning flames that signal the beginning of another episode of History of Westeros podcast. It is Tuesday, it is live stream time, and it is Sea Snake Take 2 Electric Boogaloo. Yes, for those of you who were here last week, we had a technical fail. Our internet was not cooperating. We don't know if it was storms or just regular internet outage, but whatever it was, the Sea Snake could not set sail, and neither could we. But everything seems to be much smoother today. Both the seas and the internet are smoother, and we expect for things to go well as they usually do. So, again, as we said last week, this is going to be our final Fire and Blood live stream before the TV season starts. We'll probably do more of them afterwards, and we will definitely be doing monthly Saturday streams after the season. We will be doing them weekly during the season.
During the season, we'll have streams on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday.
Yeah. And so stay tuned for the exact times on those, but it'll be very similar to last year as far as last season.
Yeah.
Last year, there was no Game of Thrones season. So let's get started with this episode. I'll begin like we did last week with a quote. Corlys of House Velaryon, Lord of the Tides and Master of Driftmark, renowned in song and story as the Sea Snake, and surely one of the most extraordinary figures of the age. A noble house with a storied Valyrian lineage, the Velaryons had come to Westeros even before the Targaryens, if their family histories can be believed, settling in the Gullet on the low-lying and fertile island of Driftmark, so named for the driftwood that the tides brought daily to its shores, rather than its stony, smoking neighbor, Dragonstone. Though never dragon riders, the Velaryons had for centuries remained the oldest and closest allies of the Targaryens. Their sea was their element. Or the sea was their element, not the sky.
No, it's their sea.
It's their sea. Yeah, it kind of was their sea. During the conquest, it was Velaryon ships that carried Aegon's soldiers across Blackwater Bay, and then later formed the greater part of the royal fleet. So yeah, it was their sea. Throughout the first century of Targaryen rule, so many Lords of the Tide served on the small council as master of ships that the office was widely seen as almost hereditary. Yet even with such forebears, Corlys Velaryon was a man apart, a man as brilliant as he was restless, as adventurous as he was ambitious. It was traditional for the sons of the Seahorse, the sigil of House Velaryon, to be given a taste of a seafarer's life when young, but no Velaryon before or since ever took to shipboard life as eagerly as the boy who would become the Sea Snake. Super chat right off the bat from Tommy Pappas. Thanks, Tommy. No question attached, but thanks for the support.
We'll be seeing him in about 3 weeks.
That's right. Seeing him at Ice and Fire Con, and a lot of you other fine people will be seeing there as well, and we're excited for that. Now, the Sea Snake is really popular. Fire and Blood is key to that, but the World of Ice and Fire is where we got our early introduction to him, and it's frankly where we get more of the information about the places he traveled to. So the Fire and Blood gives more information about him, but World of Ice and Fire gives more information about the places he's been, and that is our focus. So this is kind of a split Fire and Blood, World of Ice and Fire episode, I guess you could say, but it's inspired by the publication of Fire and Blood, so it's under that title. He does appear in the Princess and the Queen and the Rogue Prince as well, because he's a big player in the Dance of the Dragons. Speaking of the Dance of the Dragons, if we hadn't had to move the stream to this week, if we had finished it last week, if the internet had cooperated, we would probably be recording our Dance of the Dragons collab with Radio Westeros right now. But instead, that'll start tomorrow. So not a big difference. But that is our way of saying that the first episode in that series has been written, and it is where we will cover the latter half of the Sea Snake's life, whereas this is going to be focused on his early life and his voyages, which is very, very different than his life after his voyages, which contained all the politics and war. So we're going to also talk about his involvement in the Hour of the Wolf and the Regency and all that. Not just the war, but the aftermath. That'll be a big part of our dance coverage as well. So welcome back, Asshai. Good to see you.
Thank you.
And we have our also returning guest who was here last week and was part of our false start. So welcome back to hopefully a complete stream this time, at least free of drops and such. LmL, welcome back, buddy.
Well, I've thrown at least 12 people into the sea after cutting their throats, so hopefully the storm god is appeased, or the drown god, or whatever gods were disturbing us. But no, I am coming with my my Blackwater Bay t-shirt.
Nice.
Which does have a kind of sea dragon. It's a Chinese dragon. This is the Chinese New Year Warriors shirt here. So this
Very
is
cool.
on theme as I could get for you guys. But thanks for having me back. Looks like we've got a strong start today. No shaky stream. No intermittent stream,
I have to point out something that I never noticed, despite streaming with LML for a long time, that he stands during his streams.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I only know this
That's
from
right.
being there and being on one of his streams at his house, and
Did
he
you
was
stand?
standing. I believe I sat on a stool.
Oh,
I don't think
okay.
it was a really short episode. It was only like a 5-minute update thing. So, or no, was it longer than that? I guess it was a longer.
It was an hour.
It was an hour. Okay.
But that's
I think
short.
you're a secret Mormont.
As far as
I'm a big fan of the standing desk. When I sit, I hunch, and about half an hour, my shoulders hurt. So I've got into the standing desk thing, and that's how I roll. So
cool.
Thanks everybody for joining on the stream. I see the chat's already active, and everybody's was fired up last week, and thanks for bearing with us. We did what we could, but it's fun to be back.
Definitely. As far as our shirts go, Shay is rocking Broad City.
Yeah, Pod
City, really.
Cats,
Little mashup.
they had their series finale last week.
That's
also,
right.
it's a nice color that fits with House Velaryon.
And I've got Miskatonic University. I didn't have a Velaryon shirt. I don't know any Seahorse shirts, but a lot of the places the Sea Snake went to are Lovecraft inspired, and Miskatonic University is straight from Lovecraft. So if you didn't get the reference, well, now you do.
We've also got another super chat from Dark Mother for 666. Big surprise there. That's a popular number these days. Love me some mythical astronomy.
That's right. So do we all. Okay. Well, our other guest who isn't present in person, but whose presence in this episode is going to be large, is our artist friend Drafturgy, who created a lot of art just for this episode. And a lot of these pieces are going to be available for sale.
Yeah, like this one he did of Corlys and Rhaenys, along with Meleys, the Red Queen, of course. And a little bit about Drafturgy. You might have seen him on Twitter or something like that. He does concept and fantasy illustration based out of LA. He does some illustration work part-time. And lately, he's been switching to this cool water-based media and airbrush acrylics, which later on in the episode we'll have a process video for you of that, which is very cool. And he originally entered the fandom because of the show, but the thing that I think is particularly cool about him is that he's very into the book lore and tries to do these illustrations according to the book descriptions. And you can really see there's a unique quality to it. And he does a lot of references and stuff like that. He's got 3D models and etc.
Yeah.
And so we reached out to him for this episode because it's just this very real and evocative style, as you can see here on the screen. And so you can find him on Twitter at Drafturgy. That's DRAFTURGY. And also on Instagram at Drafturgy. And he's going to have links set up on his website for prints for sale. So you can get this awesome Corlys and Rhaenys print. And you'll see some very cool pieces throughout the rest of the episode.
Yeah, please check his website out. Support his work. We love to support artists in this community. And we hope you all decide to support him as well. And yes, I think you're going to love what we've got of his art in this episode. We also have, because we're going to so many cool places that the Sea Snake went to, we are also going to have a lot of Michael Klarfeld map shots. So with that in mind, I very frequently point out to our podcast only listeners that there are ways to see these images. One of them is to use the Acast podcast player. It's free. There's no ads or anything. We don't get any money from it. It's just a good thing to have because it allows you to see these images in the audio podcast. You can scroll through them. You can see them. They're just nicely presented. So it's a good way to get some images on your phone. But also, we're going to post these in a couple places online as well. Some links and the map shots as well. So lots of ways to see this art. And of course, you can always check out this video if you're listening afterwards, if you're not catching the live stream. So lots of ways to keep up with that. Let's give some quick shout outs to people who make the show possible, and then we'll get started. We have new art to feature as well coming for our Dragon Telarius, but we have new art today for Atraxis, who is, of course, the dragon of Robert IV of House Ardeacor, who is Burn King of Blazewater Bay. And this is the new art, a black dragon with bioluminescent spots like smoldering embers and a banded blue tail. I've forgotten, which artist is that?
Azani.
Azani, very cool.
Bottom corner.
That's right. Yeah, it does say that, doesn't it? Yeah, Azani has done other dragon art for us as well, so the style is becoming rapidly familiar to History of Westeros fans, if they weren't already. And of course, we also have Talanis the Talon, King of Gagassos, rider of Talarius, a red dragon with scales, horns, and talons of midnight black. New art on the way for him shortly as well. Can't wait to debut that.
Mm-hmm.
I was just real quick. I was going to say the blue and black one is like a shade of the evening dragon. A little bit.
It's really cool, huh?
Kind of like that. Yeah, I'm still thinking of the Expanse. I'm like, it's a proto-molecule dragon. Yeah.
It's kind of like a white dragon.
I have a weird dragon amongst my patrons. So
that's cool.
That's Melanie Lot 7.
Oh, right on. Also, of course, a shout out to a man who does not fear dragons of any size, Jeff Gnarly the Long Snapper, History of Westeros' first sword. All right, that is it for the announcements. Let's get right to it. We did some History of House Velaryon in the Oakenfist episode, so we're not going to retread that. But there are a few things we didn't talk about that bear mention here that are a little more relevant to Corlys than they were to Alan. And that is this whole bit that was touched on in the opening quote about how the Master of Ships office is almost hereditary. Look at how it breaks down. That's almost an understatement of the early days of the Master Ships. The first Master Ships was Daemon Velaryon, followed by Aethan, who was the son of Daemon, followed by Daemon, who was the son of Aethan, and he was promoted to Hand. And so Manfred Redwine became Master of Ships after Daemon was promoted to Hand. And then we get Sea Snake. And here's another piece of another piece of art from Drafturgy. You got the black and white and the color. It's very cool. I love the horizon back there. He looks like a proper sailor. A little bit of a Captain Morgan feel there. And then we have, Sea Snake himself is Master Ships, followed by Oakenfist for Daeron the First. Well, not followed by Oakenfist. There's maybe some in between that we're not clear on, but I believe that Oakenfist may have been next. And then in between all that, we have nothing. We don't know who the Master Ships were from all the way from Daeron the First all the way to Aerys the Second. So from about 140-ish, 150-ish, all the way to 260 something. We don't know who the Masters of Ships were. So there could have been more Velaryons in there for all we know. But all we know is the last one for the Targaryens was also a Velaryon. He was a real crappy guy, though. This Lucerys Velaryon was like agreeing with Aerys on everything. He's like, yeah, you want to burn people? Yeah, let's do that. You want to cut people's heads off for very minor things? Yeah, do it. So he's not someone that I think Corlys Velaryon, our subject today, would be proud of. Early in his life, he was born in 53 AC, which is 1 year before Elissa Farman ran off with the dragon.
You're saying early in his life he was born.
That's usually when people are born, right?
Yeah.
People are usually not born late in their lives. In fact, when they are born late in lives, it's really quite a story. It's very noticeable. So he's normal that he was born at age 0.
Yes. Okay.
Nothing unusual at that. No strange Targaryen birth defects or anything like that, even though his name is the Sea Snake. So he would have been about 2 when the Sun Chaser was completed and about 3 when her voyage to the west began. So he would have grown up hearing about her. In Mariner circles, I would have to imagine she was just
a legend.
Things people would talk about her a lot. And this is also 1 year before Daemon, as in the Daemon who became Master of Ships and then Hand, retired. Also 1 year before Jocelyn Baratheon was born. And despite Jocelyn Baratheon being younger, she would eventually be his mother-in-law and his cousin, because, that's how these upper nobility things work out.
We need Olenna to describe all this for us, I think.
Yeah. What do you think about that, LML? What do you think it would be like to be growing up as like a mariner with this incredible figure who had just lived in the prior generation? Plus, you come from this tradition of like amazing mariners. It must have been kind of a great environment for him.
Well, I thought you were going to ask me about coming from a family where the family tree goes sort of backwards and up. And
well, you can mention that too. That's a worthy topic.
I wouldn't know anything about that. I do come from a long line of gardeners myself, though. Both my father and grandfather are gardeners.
Really?
And,
okay.
I was, of course, for a time a gardener. So it wasn't really a lot of pressure, though, on my shoulders. Wasn't quite that much greatness compared to the sea snake. But yeah, that kind of pressure can either crush somebody or can, propel you to great heights. And so obviously our young sea snake was determined to, right from a young age, he was pushing the envelope constantly. So he's just one of those people that was constantly looking for new horizons, looking to sail farther and, longer and all that stuff. So that's just him.
That's a really good point about the pressure of past generations. It's a thing that people can either wilt under or really rise to. And for these nobles, it's usually like a meat grinder. They have to measure up, or they just it's a whole nother thing. And he clearly, like you said, is clearly in the mold of this was a good thing for him. He was inspired, and he followed in his family's footsteps, and not only followed in his footsteps, but just set new standards for a lot of this. He's named for Corlys Velaryon, the first Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. So talk about a name that carries weight. There were probably some Corlyses before that who were also a big deal. It seems like maybe Corlys was maybe a common house name, although we don't know of any Corlyses after him. But of course, we don't necessarily have a lot of Valyrian history to go by.
Yeah.
You got to figure there'd be more Corlyses,
you
right?
You would think, but there's other one. You would think there'd be more Alisans in the Targaryen. There's a million names like that you might think.
Good point.
But they just did it so well that no one was willing to.
Yeah, they're just like, no one is worthy of this name. We're retiring it, like retiring a jersey number for a sports team. His father, we don't know what his father's name was, but we have it narrowed down to 3. It was either Corwin, Victor, or Jorgen, which are kind of strange names to me. Victor and Jorgen don't really seem like Velaryon names to me, and Corwin's pretty similar to Corlys.
It wouldn't be. What about a core full?
A core full. Nice. Well, Corlys, or it could be like Cor Mir or Cor Pentos or Cor.
I apologize, everyone. I apologize.
You got me started. Yeah.
You got me started on that.
The eldest of those 3, whichever of those 3 was the eldest, we don't know which it was, but that one was Corlys' father, because we know that Corlys was the son of his grandfather Daemon's eldest
I'm
son.
gonna guess his father was Corwin. It just makes more sense to me.
Yeah, I kind of lean that way too. I also like that name the best. I think Jorgen's kind of it's a strange name. It's like Germanic, which is kind of a strange name for a Velaryon to have. And Victor is that's just not Westerosi until this book. There are 2 Victors in this book. I don't think there was a Victor before Fire and Blood. Anyway, so one of those 3 died into the Shivers. The second of those 3, so his uncle, and then the other 2, meaning his father and the other uncle, all died before Daemon. So grandfather Daemon outlasted all 3 of his sons, which is how the title passed straight to Corlys. Daemon sounds like a pretty impressive guy. He lived to be like 88, which is older than the Sea Snake, who lived a long time. And Nina Friel says there's a Victor Tyrell. Yes. I guess I did miss a Victor. Okay, well, my bad.
Oh,
Good catch. Nina's excellent at catching my mistakes.
Some other Vic names.
Vic name, yeah. Victarion. Yeah, it's a little similar at least. And he also had at least 3 of his 4 aunts had died before he inherited as well. So it's possible his father died young as well, which all we know is that it wasn't from the Shivers. He may have also been in Pentos, Corlys himself, because Corlys was in Pentos when the Shivers happened, because he did take a voyage there when he was really young. So he may have been away from it when all that happened. And that's just kind of interesting. This is because if you think back also, the Shivers was blamed on the Pentoshi. This is when Rigo Draz was murdered in the streets for being a Pentoshi. And so this is kind of, you wonder if what people were saying in Pentos about Westeros, blaming Pentos and all that, and if Sea Snake was on the other side of that. But he was very young for all this. You have any thoughts on that, LML? It's kind of an under the radar incident, his location during this disease.
No, it just seems like Martin is sort of setting things up for there to be a little bit of a power vacuum for him to step into. That's what I'm observing.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah, because he does. You're right. He takes over after his voyages, when after all, it doesn't seem like he would be seems like he would have been pretty far down the line of succession, even though he was in the direct line, because his grandfather lived so long. And the fact that his grandfather lived so long is why he was able to go on all these voyages. And like you said, then once he's done with all the voyages, things kind of cleared out for him, and he's basically just steps into his lordship. So,
yeah, and I think that's what makes him an interesting character, is because he's not just a Magellan, type of explorer. He's also actually turns to politics, and he doesn't just explore, but brings great wealth back to his house, as we'll discuss, and makes his house a great power, and then turns to politics and ages gracefully and remains a player until he's very old. So it's just a lot of phases in his life, so much so that you can't even do it all in one live stream. So he's a dynamic figure.
It's true. This always happens when we have guys or girls that live to be more than 40 or 50. It's like, that's 2 episodes.
Nymeria.
Yeah, Nymeria's 3. Yeah. Speaking of Nymeria, we have our episode voting in progress right now. We're about to wrap it up. So if you are a $12 or more patron, make sure you get your vote in. Looks like Lomas Longstrider's going to win. Speaking
all these
of
adventurers, we did Alyssa Farman and Oakenfist.
Because the explorers are
Sea
very
Snake
popular.
and Nymeria.
Yeah, really. We see where how well the world building type episodes do. We're certainly big fans of them. So we know that Lord Daemon, Grandpa Daemon, died when he was 88, like I said, but we don't know when he was 88. It was sometime between the years 77 and 90, a kind of a wide range. By the way, this Daemon is the second Daemon, the one that was died early, or that was his grandfather, is the Daemon that Daemon Blackfire is named after. So another little connection point there, a little detail for you.
When did they write that? When did they mention that he was named for him?
Dana the Defiant. I forget. I forget where it was.
I was just like, what was there? Well, I don't remember the context why they were like, and he did this, and so we named him after him.
Yeah, I actually forget the reason, but it's definitely mentioned. So this is, like I said, he's free to do all this exploring because his grandpa is such a strong ruler and held the powerful house in line for so long, and they're such a well-regarded house, so powerful at this time. It's easy to forget, compare what they are now to what they were then, which is back right now they're not that powerful at all. They're still around. They're with Stannis, but the Sea Snake took them from one of the most powerful houses in Westeros to the most powerful house in Westeros in just because of his exploring, in large part, which is so cool. Like, he just got so much wealth from exploring, which is very different than what we see from some of these other explorers who didn't necessarily come back with a lot of wealth. Some of them did. Euron did. Oakenfist sort of did. But Alyssa Farman, well, she didn't come back. And Lomas Longstrider, he was a scribe. He wasn't a noble that had all his means to buy a bunch of goods and bring them back and make a lot of profit from them. So that's another thing we're going to talk about during this is Corlys had some advantages. Anyway, and part of that leads to him being able to go farther. This is one of the reasons he's able to go to all these other places is because he comes from this powerful house. He has the means to do it. That's a big part of it. That's something that gets lost in the shuffle. Alyssa Farman came from a minor house. She's a noble, but she was a fugitive when she ran off, right? Mm-hmm. Oakenfist was also from the same house, but he was bastard born, and he didn't quite have the same wealth. So a lot of different stuff there. A lot of different factors that make all this interesting. But even with all that, Sea Snake, he was no slacker despite his advantages. He went farther than Lomas did. We think he went farther than Euron did. We think. So.
I want to mention, we touched on it in our, stream that never was last week,
I guess. Title for it.
Yeah. Which was the mention of there being songs written about Corlys.
Oh, yeah.
And, I really would like to challenge someone to write a sea snake. A Sea Snake.
Yeah, LmL, you up for writing some Sea Snake songs, or at least one?
That's know that I am.
That's what we need.
That's cool. Yeah, that was a good catch. That it says he's a figure of song and story. Like, what songs? Because we were talking about how Bloodraven arrived on the wall. It was probably maybe the only person who had a song written about him before he got to the wall. If you count Danny Flint, that was after the fact. But and not a very good song.
ocean, the sea snake sleeps tonight.
Yep, just like that.
Yeah,
See? It just
I think
comes
that was
out.
it.
On demand.
Yeah, perfect.
But no, seriously, like you were saying, when you compare him to Euron, Euron takes a long voyage, farther than anyone has gone in a long time, comes back with wealth, and he uses it to try to take power. He does it a little differently because he's trying to do it really fast, whereas Corlys Velaryon, gradually built up his wealth, and then on his last voyage to Karth, as we'll talk about, he took home a big haul and set himself up, and then sort of settled down to being a politician. But it's interesting how, if you can either just be an explorer or you can sort of use those riches to parlay that into grabbing power. And Euron does it in a slightly different fashion.
That's very true. It's interesting to compare Euron to the sea snake in that way. I didn't have great, we didn't have like great sea snake parallels. We do have one in this episode provided to us by a friend, but there might be, if we really dig into sea snake Euron, obviously the personalities are pretty different, but there's probably a lot more there than we may have realized at first because of that. Using the exploration to take power, that's a really pretty poignant one right there. And the depth of their exploration is really quite substantial. Super chat from Sean Schilling. Do we think the sea snake ever came across a kraken? How would they fight such a beast? It seems likely they would have come across a kraken a few times, if not more, or given the vast amount of exploring he did. How do you fight such a thing? You don't. I don't think you just escape. You hopefully just get away. If there's like 5 ships, you hope it grabs one of the other ones. It's like that.
Well, let's put it this way: we don't ever hear about him encountering a kraken. So if they did, it didn't pull down any of the main ships or leave a big enough impression. But I think encounters with krakens are probably fairly rare.
Yes, I agree. They're probably pretty rare. We did hear now when you mentioned his voyage to Karth. He did go there in one ship, buy 20 more ships once he was there, fill them all up, and go back, which is a perfect example of how, who else could do that? You need an insane amount of wealth to do that, to buy 20 ships and then fill it up with trade goods. Whoa. But it's said that 6 of those ships didn't make it back. So, it's more likely that storms or something took them out. But maybe a kraken was responsible for 1 or 2 of those 6 missing ones.
I put a related comment there for you, Aziz, that I just thought was funny.
You did? Oh, okay. Yes, from Thomas Pappas. He says, I was watching a documentary on early sea travel, and turns out a lot of krakens, quote unquote, were actually just whale penises sticking out of the water that appear like tentacles. I saw that same article, and I laughed out loud. Yeah, apparently.
No.
I don't know. It just makes me laugh.
You got to look, man. Whale penises sticking out of the water are really big.
No, I don't have to look at whale penises. I can leave them alone in the privacy of their own hindquarters.
Well said. Well said. So. Maybe the sea snake encountered some whale penis of his own.
Yeah, maybe.
Boy.
How do seahorses react to that? Yeah.
It didn't take long. We're not even half an hour into this. I haven't even made sea snake jokes yet, and you're talking about whale penis. Cool. It's cool.
We got to get started. We got to get it going quickly, or, it'll take too long. So.
That's what she said?
That is what she said. That's what she being a female whale. A fee whale? Is that what they're called? Okay, so early voyaging for him, he in between his great voyages and that first voyage to Pentos that we mentioned when he was 6, when the Shivers was raging, it says, thereafter he made such voyages every year. So he was sailing like a sailor. And it says, here's a quote, nor did he travel as a passenger. He climbed masts, tied knots, scrubbed decks, pulled oars, caulked leaks, raised and lowered sails, manned the crow's nest, learned to navigate and steer. His captain said they had never seen such a natural sailor. At age 16, he became a captain himself, taking a fishing boat called the Cod Queen from Driftmark to Dragonstone and back, circa 70 AC. This sounds a lot like what was said about Alyssa Farman, right? Like, she just took to it naturally. She was climbing the ropes, it's almost identical. So it just goes to show that he was just took to it like it was.
No matter how much you work at it, you need that natural talent.
You need that natural talent. You need to be born into a seafaring house with lots of money.
Yeah, lots of money. Yes,
that's the best way to become a sailor.
Yeah, that's why Lyanna Stark's such a good horsewoman.
On a serious note, I do like how George incorporates this idea that when somebody is in the right situation where they can follow their passion, that's when they really, really excel.
Yeah,
and you see both people that are like stuck in places that aren't conducive for them, and you see people in a good situation. And the Sea Snake is one of those examples of like he found his way early to his calling and excelled because of that.
Yeah, just kind of those when you hear stories about that in real life about people that are kind of born into something they love, it kind of makes you feel good. It's like one of those feel good stories. Like, yeah, there is some good in the world, that kind of thing. So around this time, the Velaryons, of course, like we said, were still kind of the number one house. They weren't necessarily always number one in wealth, although they were, as we said, after the Sea Snake got done. But they were pretty much always number one in influence because of their long connection to the Targaryens and their literal proximity to the Targaryens physically, let alone all the previous marriages and all that. But the Baratheons had been very much moving up the ladder, obviously descending from Orys Baratheon, who was a Targaryen bastard, is a big part of that closeness. But the Baratheons were not just marrying into the Targaryens, they were marrying into the Velaryons. It was kind of like this whole thing we're talking about where they're all just intermarrying each other. Well, Prince Aemon, who was the heir to Jaehaerys and Alysanne for a while, married Jocelyn Baratheon, who was the daughter of Alyssa Velaryon and Rhaegar Baratheon. Alyssa was the sister to Corlys' grandpa Daemon. If that made sense, I hope it did. So 4 years later, there would be Rhaenys, Corlys' future wife, who would be born. So that's the queen who never was. And here is more art from Drafturgy.
Yeah, of her along with Meleys, her dragon.
Yeah, Meleys, the Red Queen. So
I love that costuming and armor and all that. Very powerful. The tunic that she's wearing in general. I like the clothing, the costuming design on these.
Yeah, it's like she was the queen who never was, but her dragon was the Red Queen. So one of them got a crown. So other trips he made around this time were mentioned, and these are not any of his big 9 voyages, the famous 9 voyages he took. So he took voyages that were pretty substantial that didn't count among his famous 9 ones. He took a trip to the west that included Old Town, Lannisport, and Lordsport, which I believe we have a map shot for.
Mm-hmm,
and Lordsport, it's kind of interesting to hear someone going to Lordsport.
You can see on the map the 3 locations right there, and then you can see from Michael Klarfeld's Iron Islands map, Lordsport.
Yeah, very cool. I love that Iron Islands map that Klarfeld did. It's so good. You get all the sigils there and everything. I like the sigils showing you where the houses are to line up with their graphics. It's very cool.
Yeah, we really need to get it put up behind us.
We do. Yes, we do. And you don't hear about that a lot. Of course, it's implied that there's a lot of trade with the Iron Islands, but it's you usually don't hear about it this specifically. So I think that's interesting. Do you have any thoughts on some of these trading voyages, LML, or any other thoughts on maybe the art or any of the stuff that we just talked about?
Well, I do always love a good Michael Klarfeld map, that's for sure. I was just zoning out on the Iron Islands one. I do love how he's got all the sigils in there. No, I just mostly just meta thoughts on the general, like we already said, he's starting young. He's pushing the boundaries early on, and right away you can see their trade voyages. So his sailing has always been linked to, an eye towards building wealth and establishing his house. So
that's a great point. Yeah, it's a recurring theme with his voyages. Is making money. He wants to explore. He wants to see new things, but he also wants to make a profit. And there's that old adage, it takes money to make money and the rich get richer. Well, he's very much a case study in that. He took his family's wealth and multiplied it by massive amounts.
So in other words, phase 1, sail the 7 seas. Phase 2, phase 3, profits.
That's a very good rendition of the Underpants Gnomes. So it really, he had an eye for gold and he knew what to do, and he was very much ambitious and hardworking to make that happen. It didn't seem to have any hang-ups on different places to go. Didn't seem to have any fear on exploring new places. As we'll see, he's going to go to progressively more and more unexplored places, looking for presumably more opportunities for wealth, but also just, yeah. I mean, part of opening up these places, it's like you're opening up new markets. It's not just necessarily one voyage. It's you may establish trade routes and semi-permanent deals with some of these places that would build recurring wealth instead of just a big score. We have another trip that he took, a little bit more ambitious. This is, I guess, his first time outside of Westeros, besides going to Pentos. So he goes to Lys, Tyrosh, Pentos again, and Myr, which we have another map shot for, which I guess is already on screen. You can see all the destinations circled. It makes sense to kind of hit all those targets along the way.
All those targets.
And you kind of wonder, I guess, at Lys, I'm not sure what the trade goods at Lys are. Myr has a lot of these fine glass works.
Women.
Women, yeah, that is one of them. We don't know that he dealt in slaves, but he may have. It's certainly possible.
I mean, he could be doing something very different, which is bringing women for the brothels back there. Like, hey, you'll be free, technically.
That's true. You wonder about that exotic women, like different looking women or whatever. That's people would definitely pay for that. And then, Tyrosh has its dyes, and Myr has its crossbows and its glass. Myrish glass is
Pentos
really
has
fancy.
its pens.
Yeah. Nice. So there's a lot of possibilities there. Well, let's move on to the next section we're calling Bolder and Smarter. You want to read this quote, LML? Let's share it around. Right where my cursor
Why,
is.
sure. Is this the...
Lord Corlys was an ambitious man.
You can just click on my cursor face.
Mm-hmm.
Lord Corlys was an ambitious man. During his 9 voyages on the Sea Snake, he was forever wanting to press onward, to go where none had gone before, and see what lay beyond the maps. Though he had accomplished much and more in life, he was seldom satisfied, the men who knew him best would say.
That does paint an interesting picture, kind of guy who success doesn't make him rest on his laurels. It's always like, well, success just means I could have even more success. You know, he's always just very type A, I guess you could say. I like how there seems to be a little bit of a Star Trek nod there, to go where none had gone before. Yes, lay beyond the maps, indeed. We had spoken during the Alyssa Farman episode, the Sunchaser episode, of how he could have learned from Alyssa's ship design and read some of the same books she did. But he had access to a lot of things she didn't. And this is where we get into his noble heritage, giving him significant legs up over other explorers. For one thing, he had 4 ships that he sailed kind of famously throughout his life, which is not something most people can do, because ships are super expensive, especially the kind that you want to take on dangerous voyages to dangerous places. We heard about that ship he called the Cod Queen, which is kind of a funny name. And the Summer Maid was his next one. They kind of get progressively more like dangerous sounding. Then the Ice Wolf. And then the Sea Snake is like, oh, yeah. So he gets his name from the Sea Snake. It's interesting to point out he wasn't called the Sea Snake early in life. The nickname came from this ship. So it's kind of funny. He gave this ship a name and people started calling him that, which is, I wonder how that happened. That's a little strange, really. So yeah, let's really dive in.
Why did he name it the Ice Wolf?
What's that?
Is there any particular reason he named it the Ice Wolf?
Yeah, he tried to use it to explore the icy areas
for
north
that
of.
Anyways.
Yeah.
It just seems like such a arrogant kind of hubristic thing. I'm like, you're no wolf. People aren't wolves.
There's actually that's part of one of the cool parallels we found. We'll get to that shortly. It's kind of neat. The Ice Wolf has some other symbolic meaning. So what I want to think about, this is where my imagination really runs wild. He's got all these books. He's got access to the Velaryon library. He's probably got Targaryen books as well. And if he's sitting here going, where am I going to sail? He's looking at these old books and deciding, where am I going to go in these cool voyages? Where are these places he's going to go figure out? he's going to have a lot of literature to look through to give him ideas. He's going to have these old books, things that maybe Lomas Longstrider and Alyssa Farman maybe didn't have access to. Rare books that would maybe describe some of these places and maybe even have information on their markets and trade goods that might be something that's are kind of well-protected secrets. For example, he wouldn't go to Valyria probably because we did by this time already have Area's experience. However, that was kept under wraps, right? Barth didn't write about Area. Barth's writings on Area came out much later. So that's interesting to consider. Corlys might not have known about that. On the other hand, he's an insider, so he might have heard it because, he's so tight in the nobility. He might have been in on those secrets. But if he didn't, then why? Then you wonder maybe he had good reason to not go to Valyria. Why didn't he go to Valyria as one of his voyages unless he knew something? Any thoughts on that, LML?
Yeah, he wasn't crazy.
That's a good point. He wasn't crazy. He's no Euron.
Yeah, it's just, it's supposed to be portrayed as a reckless and dangerous thing. It wouldn't work if George had too many people go there. So
that's a good point. Yeah.
And also, I'm like, there's so many places to get riches in the world to make vast fortunes. Why go to the one that you're like 99% to just die?
Yeah, I guess the argument is that if there really are still riches to be had there, that would make it compelling. But like you say, it's not worth it when there's other possibilities. Yeah. And so that's the other way to look at this. Maybe Corlys looked at the history of his family and all the different voyages House Velaryon did, including when they lived in Valyria, like when they were before the Doom. Like the Velaryons back then were apparently a naval house, and they would have probably been exploring back then as well. They may have gone to Sithorius. They may have gone to these other places. But Corlys may have had the opposite attitude. He may have looked at all the places his family had been and said, I'm not going there. I'm going to places they haven't been. He would have used it as a checklist for places he doesn't want to go. He's like, I want to go to new places only. So, yeah, go ahead.
Corlys comes off as a very practical and savvy kind of person. It just doesn't fit his character to do something reckless and dangerous. He was fearless, yes, but not foolish and reckless. I just don't feel like it fits his personality. That's probably what I'd say.
I agree with that. Yeah, I think you're right. I think we do have a pretty good beat on his personality, at least enough to know that he wasn't like a Euron type of, visionary in that sense. He was more practical. Yeah. So it could be some of both, right? He may have wanted to check out some of the places his family had been, but maybe because it had been so long, it was time to check it out again, or maybe because they'd only been there before the Doom, and of course the Doom reshaped global politics, so there could be all sorts of new markets opening up, and trade goods, like I said, he would have information on ancient trade routes and things like that. And given that he eventually amassed a greater fortune than that of the Lannisters or Hightowers, which is kind of staggering to think about, he definitely, as we said, had his eye on being practical this whole time. No matter what he was doing, it was mixed in with making sure a profit came out of it all. And that speaks to him having a real good sense of value. Like, you got to know what trade goods can be brought back to Westeros and sell for a bunch. Some of them, it's kind of obvious. Some of the spices and stuff that already have. But if he's going to new places that Westerosi have never been, he's got to take a look at what they have and be like, I want to buy a lot of this and take it back. I want to buy a lot of this and take it back. He's got to know what's going to sell. So that's a whole different type of mindset than being a politician or being a sailor or being a warrior. It's just a totally different skill set. So it's just more fascinating. We're just building this picture of this guy who had so many skills.
Yeah, he struck that balance between taking smart, calculated risks, but sort of quitting while you're ahead, knowing when to return home, that kind of thing. So it's it's a good example of how you be successful. You can't be successful by sitting home and not venturing anything. But also the other thing about sailing to Valyria is it's hard to get a crew to sail to Valyria.
Yeah,
and true. So that's another challenge.
That's actually a great point that we can talk about that now. I had talked about it. I had it in the notes for later, but it's totally fine to talk about now, which is that as a High Lord, he has a different sort of relationship with his sailors than, say, Alyssa Farman, right? Some of them were kind of sworn to follow him no matter what, whereas Farman, she had to attract people. She's like, hey, yeah, she had to use her charisma and lots of money, which Sea Snake had the money too. But she didn't have, sworn men and people like Oakenfist. And
she was specifically a fugitive. She had things going against her, a fugitive
true.
And a woman.
Right. She not only had to recruit people under the radar, but she couldn't recruit her own people. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good point to put your finger on that. Yeah, it's almost more like the responsibility we see Robb and Ned deal with when they're thinking about their own men and risking the lives of their men who follow them. Those are the kind of things that Corlys would be thinking of when he decides where to go.
Yeah. So if we think about other stuff, we talk about wealth, about trade goods. Well, there's other things that have extreme value, like artifacts. And for example, we hear about House Celtigar, which is also a house that with Valyrian origin. And we hear that on Claw Isle, their capital, they have a kraken horn and a Valyrian steel axe. That's got to be worth a ton, both of those things. So Corlys in his books, if he's looking about, he might be keeping an eye out for things like that, for opportunities to get Valyrian steel or, I don't know, kraken horns, I guess. That would be...
Although we don't hear about those things.
We don't, not even a peep.
That it doesn't point to it.
Yeah.
That can be something that you can find and lose in a generation.
Absolutely.
Can look for and not find.
Just got to figure that given their heritage and coming from Valyria, a place that seemingly had some magical artifacts, them being fair, they weren't one of the 40 Dragon Rider families, but they were wealthy and powerful, so they probably had some cool stuff. Maybe wanted to get some of it back if they knew where more of it could be found. Now think about it, and here's another connection that's I think is really interesting, that the Sea Snake had an advantage where these other explorers didn't. Consider how the nobility, even in places thousands of miles away, is sort of like an old boys network, girls too, but mostly boys, where they kind of just, you're a noble from thousands of miles away, they kind of just, oh, hello, sir, welcome, you're one of us. In some ways, it's very literal, like at Volantis. You can't go behind the black walls of Volantis unless you're invited in or unless you can trace your descent to Old Valyria. So Lomas Longstrider goes to Volantis, what can he do? Sea Snake sails into Volantis, and they're like, oh, you are certainly the blood of Old Valyria. Hi, welcome, how you doing? So I think, just in these places, he's going to get the red carpet rolled out for him just because of who he is and who his house is, and because he's rich, and that obviously that counts for a lot too. They want him to be his friend, whereas people are just not going to care about Lomas Longstrider. They're not going to necessarily care about Alyssa Farman either. Some people will, but to a higher degree. Sea Snake, just wherever he goes, people are going to be wanting to talk to him, wanting to give him stuff, wanting to, so I think that's really, really important. A really big differentiator. They're like, oh, it's the Lord of the Tides. That's a big name. So any thoughts on that, LML? What secrets he could get behind the black walls? What this access gets him? What other things it would do?
No, I'm sure the racists in Volantis liked Corlys Velaryon quite a bit.
Yeah, he has the silver hair and the purple eyes, fits right in.
No, but seriously, that's a great point. I hadn't thought about that. It's again, just like we just said, Corlys is going to be somewhat adverse to taking foolish risks because of his status as a lord. He also had a lot of doors open to him, or would have as a lord, and so yeah, that definitely helped his voyages be so profitable. So no, that's just a good point.
And the same thing goes with books. Any access he had at the Citadel to reading about ship design and other places, he might have that at Volantis as well, whereas other people wouldn't. He would have access to whatever their secrets are, maybe at least greater access to those things, and that would teach him maybe more things about shipbuilding and trade routes and things like that, about what other places might be worth going to. And even if his station didn't help him, like his being Lord of the Tides and all that, his money, that speaks. That's the universal language, of course. And then he went to the Summer Isles. The Summer Isles is another one of his major voyages. And talk about learning ship design, right? That's... Apparently, the Summer Islanders have some of the best ship designs in the world. They're the most explorish of all the people we know, you could say, probably. And he had to have learned some things there. Any other thoughts on what might happen at the Summer Islands for him? They're kind of a different culture, and I wonder how he was received there, different to some of the other places.
Yeah, the Summer Islands are amazing because the Summer Islands is like shipbuilding central. Their boats are built up quite a lot in the when Sam gets on one in the main series. So we know that these guys are just OG shipbuilders with techniques that have been developed kind of apart from everyone else. They're closely guarded. They have a different kind of wood, this golden heart wood, which enables them to, if they can make bows that are better than anything but dragon bone, then that tells you this wood is extraordinarily rigid, yet flexible and supple. So it's like the perfect kind of wood that you want for long shafts and beams and things. And
long shafts?
That's what she said.
Sorry, yeah, no, I was just taking that as far as I could. So yeah, it's definitely it's one of those things where you can see George has designed the culture a little bit. Not only are they good shipwrights because they live on islands, but because they have a natural resource which enables them to do that. So Corlys definitely would have learned quite a bit in the Summer Isles. That's another good point to raise.
I feel like they would have been. I just picture him nerding out with some other Summer Islanders where there's a translator who can barely keep up. He's like, they're just talking at each other so fast. They have so much they want to say about ship design and nerding out over all that stuff. But the translators would be like, wait, hold on. I got to tell him what you said. And give me a second, man. Super chat from Dark Mother, feeling sentimental about the smart couple who streams together to all our benefit. Indeed. Even when one of us almost dies of a coughing fit.
Yeah.
The chat was all like, tears of bliss, tears of bliss.
Yeah, it might have been. I don't know.
Well, you're clearly immune to the tears of bliss because you're still alive. It didn't kill you, so.
Yeah, well, I am the weeping lady of Lys. You can see me back there with the tears of Lys, so I should damn well be immune to it, I would think.
You notice Aziz quickly reached out and dumped over her cup of water. What's that about?
I'm so mean. Okay, well, let's move on to the next step here.
The Ice Wolf.
The Ice Wolf. We're going to talk about the Ice Wolf. So, consider all this stuff we've talked about to this point. All the different places. Old Town, Volantis, Pentos, Summer Islands, probably Bravo. All these places that have shipbuilding as part of their history. He's been to all of them, and then he builds the Ice Wolf. So, what is the point of the Ice Wolf? It was, he wanted to go northwest. He wanted to find a way around basically what's the lands of always winter. So how cool is that? He was trying to sail north and west, which, as far as we know, no one's done that. And wow, that seems, talk about brave. I mean, it's not going to Valyria, I guess, but that's got to be damn cold. And I guess the Ice Wolf would have been a ship that could handle things like ice in the water. Maybe
should have gone with like the whale.
The whale. And
Martin does call whales the wolves of the sea in a couple of instances, but
that's true. That's true.
The Ice Wolf can be a whale.
This voyage is really interesting, Aziz, because it's probably the most risky, if you will, of anything. Even sailing to Asshai, like people go to Asshai, that happens. Trying to find a Northwest Passage, it's definitely his riskiest voyage, but it's also Martin trying to riff on, the explorers of the 16th century and the 14th and 15th century, where they're trying to find a new passage. But again, think about it. If he finds a new passage, that's a trade route.
It is.
So really, he's still going after trade there.
Yeah, you're right that it's more risky in that it has more implied dangers, and that it also has more danger of being not making a profit, because if he doesn't find a passage, there's nothing else up there to do. It's not like he can trade with the White Walkers or something. Now, that said, he definitely still had money in mind even without the passage, because on the way to this, we're told that he did 2 voyages in the Ice Wolf, at least 2 voyages in the Ice Wolf, and this is when he goes to Bravos, which Shay is putting on screen. And he even goes to places like Eastwatch and Hardhome, which is another one he went to trade with Hardhome. Now,
conspiracy time.
Yeah, and how did he do that? That's supposed to be against the law. You're not supposed to trade with wildlings. So it just is just glossed over, I guess. He just, maybe because he's rich and powerful and he's the sea snake, he can do that. But we hear about Davos being on a ship when he was young, and he was sailing with somebody that traded arms to the wildlings and got executed. So maybe the sea snake wasn't trading them weapons. Maybe that's how he got away with it. He just traded, whale bones for furs. I don't know, things like that. So that would maybe how he got away with it. But it's interesting. So what do you think, LmL? What are some of the conspiracy theories that could come from this?
Oh, well, just anytime Hardhome comes up, I want to start talking about dragon bombs and the faceless men and the maesters. But all that happened a long time ago. That was 600 years in the past. We're only like 200 years in the past here. So
that's true.
It is interesting. Does that show a little bit of like the sea snake throwing around his political power, where he's breaking the law because he kind of knows he can get away with it and just sort of goes to Hardhome, is like, yeah, they're not going to do shit about it.
We might be suffering from getting our chronology off here. It's possible this prohibition with trading against the wildlings didn't exist yet. I would think it did, though. I would think it existed for a long time. I would think the Starks would be like, don't do that. So. But we don't know for sure. The prohibition may have only been a northern thing. Maybe it was more of maybe it didn't spread to the rest of the realm because they just didn't matter to them.
Maybe they have like contracts. Like, I got the official wildling contract. And I'm the only one who can trade to them.
Well, after Martin finishes Winds of Winter, Dream of Spring, all the Dunk and Egg books, Fire and Blood 2, and we get the Tale of the Sea Snake. Gardner in, that whole dynamic of him going to Hardhome. We can figure out if that was a rebellious act or if he got a waiver or what.
Well, the other part that's interesting here, too, to throw in the mix with the details, is that he went to Eastwatch and then to Hardhome. So whatever what Night's Watch said, whatever the laws were, he found out right before he went there. So they probably knew he was going there. So it may have been more on the up and up than we think. But it's definitely a point of interest for sure.
Yeah, that points to it being to him having permission if he went to Eastwatch first.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. So then he apparently went to, now it's unclear whether he did this first or after failing to find a Northwest Passage, but he went to Lorath. Here comes another map. Lorath, of course, is the kind of the backwater of the 9 free cities. It's the least wealthy and the...
Rude.
That's what it says in the World of Ice and Fire. But yeah, rude. It is rude. And it's got a really interesting history, and you wonder how Corlys interacted with the blind god worshippers or the maze or any of that. What do you have any? Maybe even some more ship design stuff there. Probably not. I don't know. They definitely have ship and a lot of fishermen there, but it doesn't sound like they were particularly advanced. What do you think about him interacting with Lorath? Lorath is kind of a lesser discussed, but very interesting place. Very creepy and cool. What do you think, ML?
He probably went up there and was like, "So, do you guys have any money?" No.
I'm gonna continue on.
Okay, that's cool. And you use the pronouns funny. Yeah, I'm out of here.
He sailed along to somewhere far more interesting to a sailor, the port of Ib.
Yeah, he went to the port of Ibn next, which is really cool.
For Ib,
yes.
And they do have some interesting whale tech for sure, and whale tech, ship tech that has to be geared towards, hunting whales.
I particularly love this map shot too. I agree with what you said, but
I like Michael Clarfeld did a really great job of giving different architecture to the different regions in Essos in particular, where it really is evocative, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Ib is a crazy place. It's very high fantasy when you read the description of Ib. Like, they have a god king, and they're like this weird sort of...
they can kind of breed with humans, but not quite. It's one of those, like, donkeys.
Yeah.
Mules.
Yeah, and the whole story of their them building a city and then get on the mainland, Essos, and the Dothraki wiping it out. It's pretty interesting stuff. But I'm curious, like... Corlys, like, that's pretty off the beaten path. Like, I wonder why he went there. At this point, it's almost like more of an explorer thing. Like, he's just sort of hitting everywhere and just seeing what's there. Who knows what sort of opportunity he'll see. But it's interesting. He's open-minded, I guess you could say. Like, he's looking for trade opportunities in pretty weird places.
I think it's interesting that he goes all the way to Ib on this trip, but he doesn't actually go to, like, the Thousand Islands or anything like that until his later trips. He was so close.
Yeah, maybe he was thinking ahead to that. He's like, I need to check out these bases on the way. If I want to go really far, I need to, get a presence.
Know the route that I'll take eventually. Yeah,
make sure it's a friendly port for him, because Ib is known as a fairly closed culture. Apparently, foreigners are not allowed outside the city, the port of Ibn. However, apparently it does happen sometimes. They're sometimes allowed outside the city with guests, if a local shows them. And if anyone's going to get showed around, it might be the famous and powerful sea snake.
Well, let's think about this. The Ibonese are known for being traders themselves. They show up in ports everywhere. And so they'd surely been showing up at Driftmark forever. And so he probably actually had connections to Ib before he ever sailed there. He probably at least had some names to drop or somebody to look up.
I'm picturing like some Ibonese sailers like, yeah, you ever come to Ib? Look me up. Just an empty gesture. And then Corlys shows up.
And they're like, look at this motherfucker.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. In fact, their history might go back even farther than that. They may have been trading with House Velaryon before the Doom, because the Ib as a culture is as ancient as the Dawn Age, and they've been an island nation since their beginning. So they've been trading all over. So that actually stands to reason quite a bit. Yeah, that's a good catch there. That he probably knew them before they knew him, or other way around. Yeah, they knew him before he knew them.
Yeah, Corlys is a little bit of an OG here. Like, he's running shit, he's not just sailing around the world. Like, he's making connections, he's making money, he's establishing himself. Like, this guy he's an enterprising dude. And
this is yet again a place for him to study, like Asshai said, the whaling ships. This is yet another style of ship for him to geek out over and study and learn from. Because this is still before his final, most famous vessel was built, the Sea Snake. So a lot of different books and experiences went into the Ice Wolf, but even more went into the Sea Snake, which hasn't even happened yet. So that was the first voyage. As Asshai said, it looks like Ib was as far as he went, besides the... Ib is as far as he went on his first voyage. The second voyage in the Ice Wolf is when he goes beyond the wall.
But he already went beyond the wall in the first voyage, technically.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry, we should say beyond Hardhome. This is when he goes beyond Hardhome. This is when he's actually looking for the Northwest Passage. So he's already been to Hardhome, Eastwatch, and all that, and he's already kind of established. At least he knows what's there. So he's going. So he's going farther
from the east, trying to find a way to get to the west, north.
Yes,
to be clear.
He's trying to sail around it all.
He's coming, as we saw, he was coming from Braavos, Lorath, and Essos side.
And that makes a lot of sense, because as we know, it's very dangerous to sail from along the south of Westeros. There's a lot of ships can't do that very easily. A lot of ships are built in Old Town and just spend their entire life of a ship going to places, just staying on the west coast. They would go to Lordsport and Lannisport and the Arbor, and back and forth, maybe to Bear Island, but they would a lot of times would never even bother to sail east, because it's dangerous. There's whirlpools and krakens, and that southern shore of Dorne is dangerous.
There's nowhere to land besides Starfall, basically all the way from Old Town to like the Water Gardens or Sunspear.
Yeah, we saw how bad it was for Oakenfist. So yeah, it's not an easy thing. It might seem simple, but it's not. So this northerly route thing, I wish I had more to say about it. I'm reluctant to move on, because it's just such a cool idea. You wonder if how aware he was of things like, is the world a globe? And if he was trying to go, so Northwest Passage was his main goal. But if he found, a way around the globe, he certainly would have run with that as well. If whatever else he found, he would have been interested in. But I guess he didn't find anything. I wish we had more detail on exactly how the borders, like just how far north he tried to go. And did he see anything? Like, how cold was it? I doubt he saw dead things in the water, but that kind of thing comes to mind, when someone is going that far north, like where the land of always winter is. Very, very evocative, not provocative.
Well, Aziz, every time George mentions the idea that there might be a passage, it just makes me think that he's might be keeping alive the idea that the others don't just come out in Westeros, and that they come down from the North Pole, maybe into the Grey Waste, and that the demons of the Lion of Night that we hear about in the east are actually the others, and it's their version of the others.
Okay.
That's a theory that, like, Quinn from Ideas of Ice and Fire likes that one. A few other people have talked about it. So every time he teases that Northwest Passage idea, I feel like he's sort of keeping that idea alive.
I believe that Adam Whitehead likes, as in AKA Wordhead, is also a fan of that theory. I think he's even drawn a speculative map of, West Planetos' version of Antarctica. Or would that be no, North Pole? Wait, which is Antarctica in the south or the north? I always forget.
What do you?
God, haven't you ever seen Alien vs. Predator in Antarctica where they find the pyramids? And
guess not. Super chat from Sanrixian 666 for the sea snack.
No, for the snee snack.
The snee snack. Sorry, very sorry. I mispronounced the snee snack. You know how many times I wrote the Sean snake in our documents? So many.
No comment. No comment.
All right, so let's do our mid-roll shout-outs as well as showing that process video we wanted to show. So this is our little mid-roll break that includes some fun art. Let's start with that. Let's do the process video first.
Okay, here we go. I will play this.
Look how cool this is. It's sped up a little.
Yeah, I had to speed it up from what he even linked us to just to get it under 1 minute. But yeah,
look at that turbo fingers.
Yeah, he is that fast though in real life.
See how the magic is done. Look at that. Look at those dragons coming in. His ability to create depth is really,
you can see
really
on the sides
fantastic.
the 3D models and preferences that he has.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, I always enjoy seeing this kind of stuff. I think that's one of the things people enjoy about watching Sanri work on our live streams.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
I know I do.
The process.
But you can see these airbrush things, by the way, in the
yeah, look how cool that is. Look at that color. Love it. Oh, I see that it is Antarctica is the south and Arctic is the north. Okay, right. I can never keep that straight. I can never remember.
Antarctica is in the south. That's where Atlantis is. It's under the ice down there.
Okay.
So yeah, you can see
Antarcticless.
And we got through
Atlantis.
that. And so yeah, like we said, that'll be for sale imminently.
Yeah.
And we will certainly say something in an episode when it is actually for sale.
For one of our other A Song of Ice and Fire favorite fandoms is The Expanse. Of course, The Expanse has a deep connection to George R. R. Martin, given that the authors...
it was started in a role-playing group
that George was part of.
With George R. R. Martin, yeah. But book 8 out of 9, and there are also a variety of short stories and novellas, is out now.
Yep, and only so the series is going to be done in probably 2 years when the next final book comes out, and we're huge fans. And you can get the book through our website, Amazon.
And I can
links
tell you
on
that
historyofwesteros.com.
I've really enjoyed every book in the series, but this most recent one, book 8, is my favorite in the series. So the quality just stays up there. Highly recommend it. There's a new season 4, coming out on Amazon probably late this year. So it's never been a better time to get into The Expanse.
Yep, it's a great experience. The world building is fantastic. The characters are great, and each season is better than the last. Okay, I mentioned our Radio Westeros Dance of the Dragons collaboration at the beginning of this episode. Just a reminder that we're going to be recording that this week, and hopefully that'll be out. We're expecting to get it out before the TV season. That's our goal, so keep an eye out for that. And as a reminder, you can use the discount code HISTORY to get $5 off your Ice and Fire Con ticket purchase or your Con of Thrones ticket purchase. We hope to see you at both conventions, or at least one if you can make one. And please ask us anything you want to about the convention experience or anything like that. We host discussions about it on our Facebook group, which also I would like to recommend at this point.
And so we'll see you at Ice and Fire Con, we hope. LML will be there, and Sanrixian will be there, speaking of her. That
goes for whatever year you're listening to. This is 2019 and we're recording this, but this message applies to 2020, 2021, 2022.
I do think it is likely that at least we will be at all of these years.
That's right. Yes,
it's a lovely convention.
We are not likely to go anywhere so easily. So let's do some mid-roll shout-outs for patrons who have continued to make our show possible. We are unendingly grateful for being able to do this for a living. It's really just such a blessing. Thank you to Vorsaki, wielder of a Valyrian steel arak with a dragonbone hilt. Kohel Koi, called Sunpiercer, wielder of a dragonbone bow. Kokavo the Tamer, wielder of the wildfire whip Gehenna. And I would like to shout out 2 different queens of love and beauty. We're Feeling the love today. Erin, Lady of the Long Desert, names Emma of Starfall, the Queen of Love and Beauty, in sight of pods and men.
How lovely.
That's right. And from the depths of Flea Bottom, Lord Ken of House Hammer has declared for Queen Carl. Sorry, Queen Carrie. Queen Carl. Oh, I really butchered that. Let me start that over. From the depths of Flea Bottom, Lord Carrie of House Hammer has declared for Queen Carrie, Fire of the North, who recovered Dark Sister from beyond the wall. Very cool.
I was like, wow, we've got 2 same-sex pairings in this one, Queen Carl.
Sigh.
Oh.
And also, thanks to our Ironborn captains, it's definitely time to shout out the sailing group, given the content of this episode. Black Macho Stormrider is captain of the Rusted Hinge. Oisan the Wanderer is captain of Naga's Living Flame. Sir Selvus Redblade of White Harbor is captain of Trident of the North. Lord Chucklaw is captain of the Droman Nightblood, is destroyer of evil. John Gregor is captain of the Fist of the Drowned God. Sir Kiron of Lonely Light is Scourge of the Sunset Sea, captain of Naga's Breath, a Dromund armed with siphons of wildfire. Aileen is Archer Queen, captain of the Border Collie. Crimson Cade is captain of the Drowned Queen's Vengeance. Jasana the Just is collector of tolls, captain of the Golden Gift. Lord Mitch of House Bailey is captain of Widow's Blood. His heir is Lordling of Mason of House Bailey. Beneath the Gold is a podcast focusing on lesser-known A Song of Ice and Fire characters. And Phantom of House Physics is the Sunset King, Plato Oplomo, captain of Leviathan's Banshee. I also want to give a shout-out to LML's Sunday streams. People have been calling it church, which is pretty accurate. It's Sunday, so that's a good thing to call it. And you keeping that regular for quite a long time has really made it, it made it a regular thing. A lot of people in the fandom, it's the thing you do every Sunday. I show up very often on Sundays and hang out, have a good time, and you guys always have fun discussions, and there's very often Sanrixian art, and it's a great regular experience. You guys are doing a great job.
Well, thanks, man. It has become a fun staple. Sometimes it gets ahead of me as far as like editing all the audio to put everything on the podcast stream. But I'm looking for some help on that, and I'm getting better at that. But it's great. It's fun to collaborate with all the other myth heads, and the exciting thing is that we're going to be turning this into an HBO show coverage hour.
I'm sorry, I just really cracked up at the idea. You're like, the fun thing is that we're going to be turning this into an HBO show.
Anyway,
sorry.
Big news. We've been picked up. They dropped the ringer. Sorry, Bill Simmons. Sorry, Mallory Rubin. Jason Concepcion, you guys are out.
Too bad this isn't April Fool's Day. This was yesterday. It was April Fool's Day. This would really go over perfectly.
Yeah, well, I can read the synopsis for my fantasy novel if you'd like.
Actually, you should, because it's really funny. It's only a few paragraphs, too. So, yeah, do it. Do you have it handy?
I do. It's up right here. So
he has it memorized.
So just real quick, let me finish my series plug. So basically this Sunday, 3 Eastern pregame show with all the myth heads. We'll be analyzing the show from a book's perspective, trying to read the tea leaves, talking about chiefly those sort of comparisons, symbolism, stuff like that. Lots of fun myth heads, some you don't. So that's going to be happening. We'll also do a post-game show. That's all on the Lucifer Means Lightbringer channel. And you guys know you can find all my stuff by looking for Lucifer Means Lightbringer. But I am an aspiring author, like many of you guys, and speaking of Atlantis and lost civilizations, I'm writing something called The Chronicles of Akinra. And so book 1 will follow Icentris, the rise and fall of the last queen of the kingdom of Levitra. Icentris, the powerful sorceress, and the 3 princes of the blood royal, Hermias, Jalen, and Trizavir. With the death of their father, King Tarka VII, these princes will turn to rivals, and the throne of Levitra stands imperiled. Her own hands tied by secrets more dangerous still, Icentris must work to keep the peace through the hidden hands of her only true allies, the Princess Jolessa, a talented girl of only 17, her handmaiden Humira, a refugee of the same foreign war that claimed the life of King Tarka, and the assistant to the Keeper of Records, Levemir Flexpen. Thick-skinned yet iron-strong, the one-legged librarian Levemir had been Icentris's pillar for years, functioning as her eyes and ears inside the capital and ferreting out every plot. But when the doomsday prophecy of an ancient tome aligns with the current events, Queen Icentris and her motley band must work their greatest miracle yet to save Levitra from eating itself. And all the while, under the holy mountain Viagra sleeps the ancient magic known as the Akinra.
The holy mountain Viagra.
So there's a little more, but I don't want to, we got to hear about the neighboring city-state of Cialis and the Evil King's antics. But as you can see, this is a fantasy novel synopsis made purely out of the names of drugs, and because pharmaceutical drugs sound just like fantasy names. And yeah,
Yes, they
on
do.
my Facebook and Twitter if you want the rest.
Yes, that's great. I also want to point out your comment on editing and getting podcasts up. I'd like to say to people, like, what's it like being a podcaster for a living? Like, well, I like every aspect of it except for editing. Editing is the only part of podcasting I don't like. The rest of it is fantastic, but it is so tedious. Anyway, let's talk about. Okay, so we have this great parallel. LML, you want to take this? We had a chat with at KW Dent 2, who is co-host of the Blood of the podcast. Check that out. And on Twitter, we had this conversation about. I pointed out that I didn't really have a great parallel life for Corlys, and well, here we go. We had one brought to our attention anyway.
Yeah, shout out to KW Dent and the Blood of the podcast. This was a really nice parallel. So this is done in the style of there are two answers. It's kind of so Corlys Velaryon was the first to sail Westeros to visit Nefer and navigate the Thousand Islands. Similarly, Tyrion Lannister has as somewhat of an explorer's arc early in a Game of Thrones as he travels to and visits the Wall. While Corlys Velaryon sailed his ship Ice Wolf north to the Wall, Tyrion travels with Jon Snow and Ghost. Ghost, a white direwolf, certainly is the physical embodiment of an ice wolf.
Yes.
Corlys Velaryon then travels east, as does Tyrion in A Dance with Dragons. In the famous Targaryen Civil War, The Dying of the Dragons, or The Dance of the Dragons, as it is better known, Corlys Velaryon serves as Rhaenyra Targaryen's Hand of the Queen. And of course, we know Tyrion was the Hand of the King during the War of the Five Kings, or at least the surrogate Hand of the King. So Rhaenyra was the leader of the Blacks in the Civil War, and she's often paralleled with Daenerys Targaryen. And in the show, Tyrion serves as the Hand of the Queen to Daenerys Targaryen. And of course, that could happen in the books too, as Corlys did to Rhaenyra. So they have, what's this mean? LA names?
Oh yeah, he pointed out that there's some naming convention similarities with all the Lannister names like Lyman and Lorimar and several others that are escaping me, and comparing that to how many L names there are, Laena and Laenor from the Velaryons.
And then if you consider the Tyrion Targaryen theory, shout out to my, I've got a Tyrion Targaryen theory on my loseformeanslightbringer.com. It gives both Corlys and Tyrion Velaryon descent. Additionally, Tyrion Targaryen would make both Corlys and Tyrion the grandsons of King Jaehaerys I and King Jaehaerys II, respectively. Now that is some next level shit right there. Yeah. Nice job, kid.
That last one is like, yeah, that's hard to catch, that kind of thing. And I love those parentage, those family tree catches like that, and the fact that they're both Jaehaeryses is really cool. And in fact, we found a different parallel Jaehaerys thing like that at a different one. That's escaping me, but it just sells the idea that it was 100% intentional. The fact that there's at least two of these. Also on screen right now is Xerxes, the blue-eyed cat, the blue-eyed Siamese, who is a White Walker kitty. Okay, so let's move on to the actual voyages of the actual sea snake, the ship, not the guy, the ship that he was named after. 9 voyages to Essos on this ship alone. 9 voyages to Essos. Damn. Quote here.
Traders from Old Town and the Arbor oft sailed as far as Karth in search of spice, silk, and other treasures, but Corlys Velaryon and the Sea Snake were the first to go beyond, passing through the Jade Gates to Yi Ti and the Isle of Lang, returning with so rich a load of silk and spice that he doubled the wealth of House Velaryon in a stroke.
Okay, doubled the wealth of a house that was absurdly wealthy, so wow. And it kind of goes... without saying, well, maybe it does go without saying. The interesting thing here is these are wealthy trade goods sold to wealthy people. He's not bringing back, cheaper, fabrics for making common garments with. This is silk and spice. These are the kind of things like common-born people can't even afford pepper in Westeros. So these are all expensive trade goods. And that's why when Jaehaerys was talking about making a tax on the wealthy, he taxed luxury goods. And but I don't know if those taxes were still in place when the sea snake was doing his thing. I think they were, because it was certainly during Jaehaerys' reign rather. So I got to figure the realm itself may have benefited from their cut of these voyages, large taxes, and so in a sense, some of that money maybe did trickle down. Maybe that's how some of the public works projects were partly funded.
Well, so that's the whole point of trickle-down theory, is it works to the extent that if you have the wealthy people who are increasing their wealth, turning around and using their wealth on things that create other jobs, then it works. It gets short-circuited when the wealthy don't have an incentive to create jobs, which is, economics and all that shit. But in this kind of economy, we can specifically see that Lord Corlys does use his wealth to build a whole new fucking city, that's going to create an awful lot of jobs. And also the additional trade flowing to the island created 2 new towns that started rapidly increasing. So there's a lot of wealth that he brought to his island. And that probably is strategic because he's like part explorer, part merchant, part lord, and part general all at the same time. So he's thinking about the security of his island and capturing trade. He's taking trade from other spots like Goldtown and King's Landing. So there's a lot of strategery, going on there.
That's an excellent point. I want to add something to that, which is that you're right that it's a good example of a time when he is definitely creating jobs with all these works projects and things like that. And there's a hidden factor here, which is that the peasantry aren't super mobile, but they're not forced to live where they live. It's just hard for them to move. But if they can move, a lot of times they will. And so by making his island prosperous, he's encouraging more commoners to move there and thus participate in this prosperity. And these commoners are people that can be recruited as sailors and soldiers and all that. It's actually that's a thing that happened in the Middle Ages, that when after the Black Death, labor was at a shortage, and peasants actually had a kind of a weird market advantage where there wasn't enough of them, so they could sort of pick and choose where they went to get better wages. Now, of course, that ended badly because people started passing laws to prevent them from moving from place to place. But and that happened in Westeros too. Bloodraven made people stay put during the drought. But the fact that he made people stay put during the drought implies that they were allowed to move around when there wasn't things like that going on, which is how we can get to this place, which is that the sea snake was probably increasing his own population of his own island, which just gives him more power as well. So let's talk about places he actually went. First, back to the fact that he doubled their wealth at a stroke is just mind-boggling considering how wealthy they were. It's like going from, being worth 200 million to being worth 400 million. Probably even more than that, really. So let's look at the Jade Gates and Karth. We have a map for that. And again, we get to treat ourselves to the visual goodies from Michael Klarfeld. And you got to figure there's some crazy good wealth and trade opportunities there, because that is a very advanced civilization that's existed for a long time. They have wealth. They have these gemstone emperors. It just sounds like they're wealthy, right?
So I think, Aziz, George Martin thinks a lot about trade routes. Trade routes definitely defined the ancient world to an extent that they don't quite the same anymore. And if you look at Karth, you can see exactly why it's so wealthy, because it sits astride both a land and a sea passage that are the only passages through natural obstacles anywhere around. And the same thing, we used the same logic when we were trying to figure out if Asshai used to be the capital of the Great Empire of the Dawn. And we figured out that a city that big, sitting on the tip of a peninsula, astride something called the Saffron Straits. And saffron, we are told, is the most valuable spice in the world. Mm-hmm. There's no question that this is a spot that a wealthy civilization would exist on, right on the trade route there. So Martin thinks about this a lot when he thinks about wealth and power. And we see that reflected here with the sea snake. That's
an excellent point. And if you think back a little farther in history, Karth's positioning was even better when Valyria was still there, because talk about the trade opportunities they would have from Valyria. They would probably just outstanding. Valyria, with all their absurd amounts of wealth, would just gobble up luxury goods as well as, you know, slaves and other things. They would probably just be huge consumers of such things given their dramatic wealth. So let's go forward here. Now we have some art of Yi from Drafturgy.
Did you say that somebody would gobble up the sea snake?
Yes, they would gobble up the sea snake. That's more euphemisms popping up, isn't it?
It's just that one episode of South Park after I can't hear the word gobble without thinking of Cartman. But go ahead.
So look at here's another wonderful piece. We have art of imagining of what Yitish people would look like, given the indications from the World of Ice and Fire as some of our inspiration there. And I just love, again, I'm just really drawn to the depth in this picture, or in this drawing. We also have, he also went to Leng, and as well as, this is where we mentioned the specific spices. Besides silk, there was saffron, which you mentioned, LmL, and then pepper and nutmeg and more. And like you said, too, the fact that it's named after saffron, those straits, there's other places that have a similar name. There's the Cinnamon Straits that we're going to get to in just a minute. And it's the same kind of concept that's named for this thing that makes it so wealthy. And it maybe explains why a civilization was able to flourish there in the first place. The Iron Islands it sort of refers to the people, but they have great iron deposits there as well. That's a big part of where that name came from.
Yeah, no, it's named after the iron deposits. The people are just really egotistical and bullheaded. They're like, no, it's named after us because we're tough. It's like, no, dipshit, it's named after the iron that's on your islands. But speaking of Leng, so there's the old ones that live under the city, and I've got this. No, I'm kidding.
That's part of why I wore the Lovecraft shirt today, for the old ones living under Leng. Yeah, I kind of doubt that Corlys interacted with the old ones, but
no, probably not.
But he did go to Leng, and he may have heard them talked about. Maybe I don't know. You wonder how they received him, because the Lengi are. They may not give a crap about his heritage or who he is. They're a little bit closed, I guess, from what we hear.
It's almost like George just sort of tossed that in. It's like, he went to everywhere in the Jade Sea. He went to Leng, and he went to here, and he went to there. And Yi and Karth are the places where he probably made the most money.
Probably, yeah. There's some other places that are mentioned that are hard. They're not really mentioned anywhere at all. They're just on the map, and they're mentioned that the sea snake went there. The Isle of Elephants, Marahai, and the Isle of Whips. Like, the Isle of Whips is like a way station for slave trading, and Marahai looks like Santorini in the Aegean Sea, I guess it is. Or
it's a volcanic crescent island. It's a caldera island.
Yeah, and then the Isle of Elephants is kind of a strange concept. I mean, elephants on an island sounds a little strange, but it's right by the Cinnamon Straits, which I just mentioned, and that is cinnamon as well. Now here's another quote. Ash, you want to get this one?
Mm-hmm. Other islands of note in the Jade Sea, as recorded by Corlys Velaryon in his letters, include 1. The Isle of Elephants, whose Shan rules from a palace made of ivory. Ivory, that makes sense.
Made of ivory.
But, of elephants. Marahai, the Paradise Isle, a verdant crescent attended by twin fire islands, Fire Island, where burning mountains belch plumes of molten stone day and night. That's where Alyssa Farman should have gone, Fire Island.
And the caldera, that's what he was saying. That's perfect.
And you can see that in the map, too.
Yeah.
And 3, the Isle of Whips, a bleak and barren way station where slavers from half a dozen lands buy, sell, breed, break, and brand their chattel before sending them onward.
It's like a mini Slaver's Bay.
Yeah, that one's very tiny, as you can see in the map, and very, very much smaller than the other two.
That's got to be a bleak, horrible place.
Mm-hmm.
So that's his first voyage to Essos. So this was not a small voyage. He did in one voyage covered a lot of what Euron's entire career. Euron says he went to all these different places and makes a big deal out of it. Sea Snake just did it, and then just did it again and again. So any more thoughts on any of these places, Isle of Whips or Marahai or any of that, before we move on to the next voyage?
Yeah, no, not particularly. I mean, I've got crazy theories about Leng and all that, but that doesn't really have anything to do with here.
Right. Okay.
Interesting that he just gets around here. I mean, he's definitely. Why didn't he go to Manticore Island? I don't know.
Yeah.
Going to just about everywhere else, though. We don't ever see that he went to Sothorios or the Basilisk Islands, so he seems to be trying to stay away from that kind of trouble.
Yeah, that's part of the whole. You're right. That would have been a good thing to bring up when we were talking about why he didn't go to Valyria, and you're right about him being more of a certainly not cautious, but more about bottom lines and not taking risks that don't need to be taken. And like we said, he's clearly finding wealth. Why does he need to go to Sothorios?
Why go to unknown wealth when you can go to known wealth?
Yeah, why go to danger? Why go danger when you can just swap some goods? Keep your danger limited to storms and krakens and pirates. No need to face incredible diseases. So yeah, but you make a good point, LML, that it's interesting that he only went this far because on his it's really far. But in his next voyage, he goes to Asshai, which isn't that much farther. But logistics, if his ship is just full of trade goods, he can't. What's the point of going to Asshai? He doesn't have any room left. So,
and you know what? The thing about Asshai is that Asshai has very unique needs as far as what they want and what they have, unlike any other place. So it's possible that his first voyage to the Jade Sea filled him in on what he could turn a profit with on Asshai. He came back there later with the things that they need, which I guess is like food and maybe slaves to do experiments on.
Children.
That's a great point. Yeah, you're right. He may have intended to go to Asshai as part of that trip and then changed his mind when he heard the reality of it and been like, actually, let's come back more prepared, more properly prepared. That makes a lot of sense. And of course, if there's any place to get gold and gems cheap, it's Asshai. So I guess this tells us a couple of things. One, that that story is at least partly true. There's some good trade goods there. And it may be not as dangerous as some rumors have it being, because he certainly didn't treat it like Sothorios or Valyria, which, it isn't like those places, but it is creepy and mysterious, and people apparently just disappear. And there's the water isn't drinkable. Yeah, there's, lots of stuff. Any other thoughts on Asshai there?
No.
Okay. So he probably, I figure it was probably somewhat straightforward if he brings lots of food and gets lots of gems and gold. Like if he's just trying to get wealth, it seems very straightforward how you would get it there. But there may be more to it. Perhaps we will learn more. Of course,
I guess we should give a shout out to Alyssa Farman and the fact that he saw a sun chaser here. I mean, that was a pretty cool way to end that Alyssa Farman story.
Yeah, it really was. Any more? I haven't had new thoughts on that since we did that episode, but I guess we should take a second if Asshai or LML, either you have any new thoughts on Alyssa being there, or what Corlys, we're pretty sure he was right because of his expertise on ships and everything. And but did he look for her? He would have maybe assumed she was dead by then. Like maybe he didn't look for her because it would have been so long and there's no way she still would have been alive. I
really like the idea that George has garnered in Alyssa Farman as Quaithe's backstory. I'm not set on it, but it really makes a lot of sense to me. Somebody that's so brave as to steal dragon eggs, defy the blood of the dragon, sail across the unknown ocean. Once they got to Asshai, I could totally see her later in life delving into dark magic exploration. This is a fearless person who likes to have power and adventure. It's the kind of person that likes magic. So it makes a lot of sense. And then you have all these parallels with her and Dany, with Dany reminding her of the Targaryen princess that she used to be in love with, and hatching the dragon eggs that she set in motion in all likelihood. So I'm still, having thought about the theory longer, I still like it.
Cool. That's good.
Painkiller Jane's theory, of course.
It's still holding up under scrutiny. That's the mark of a good theory. If a theory can't hold up under scrutiny, it probably wasn't a good theory in the first place. And this one keeps on trucking. It seems to be gaining traction rather than losing it, I think it would be fair to say, given our perspective anyway.
I don't know that there's any major flaw or disqualifying fact in it. It's just speculative. So
yeah, there's nothing that is a slam dunk proof of it, but there's definitely nothing whatsoever that can knock it off the board either.
Well, let's think about it this though. Martin does like to do. I mean, sometimes he does put Easter eggs in, but he likes to do things for a purpose.
Yeah.
And so Aziz, we've talked about the idea that Dany's probably going to have a glass candle in her possession because Marwyn the Mage is coming to find her and advise her. Marwyn the Mage had his hands on a bunch of glass candles and figured out how to use them. He's gearing up for the end of the world struggle, so he's probably brought one of those that the Citadel's not using. So we've talked about how in our Asshai Great Empire of the Dawn episode, how originally Martin planned on Dany going to Asshai, and Quaithe keeps telling her, there's truth for you, there's truth. And we get this idea it's probably deep magical knowledge. And then Martin changed his plans, as we know, and Dany's not going to Asshai. But we've talked about how Dany might be using a glass candle to be able to go to Asshai and gather knowledge in Asshai. And so if that happens, Dany will be communicating with Quaithe more. And that gives us an opportunity for Quaithe and Dany's relationship to build a little bit. Because right now it really lacks the emotional connection of Bran and Bloodraven, which is a lot more interesting right now than Quaithe and Dany. Right now, Quaithe is just kind of a trope. So if Dany were to get a glass candle and start delving into magic more, you could see her relationship with Quaithe deepen. And then this backstory maybe could even come into play here.
Yeah,
but
I agree, because like if Quaithe is if this connection is there, there should be some clues in the next time we see Quaithe. I imagine like the language will be written a certain way. If there's a connection there, George will complete it or give us more to work with. And if not, then maybe it wasn't meant to be. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about his third voyage. Now, of the 9 voyages, 4 through 8 we don't know anything about. So keep that in mind as we're moving forward here. Number 3, however, we have a lot of detail on. Mm-hmm. So here's another quote.
Oh, for the Thousand Islands.
Yeah, Thousand Islands putting up on screen. And here we go.
Can you read this?
Yeah.
The god kings of Ib, before their fall, did succeed in conquering and colonizing a huge swath of northern Essos, immediately south of Ib itself, a densely wooded region that had formerly been the home of a small, shy forest folk. Some say that the Ibbenese extinguished this gentle race, whilst others believed that they went into hiding in the deeper woods or fled to other lands. The Dothraki still call the great forest along the northern coast the Kingdom of the Ifakevron, the name by which they knew the vanished forest dwellers. The fabled sea snake, Corlys Velaryon, Lord of the Tides, was the first Westerosi to visit these woods. After his return from the Thousand Islands, he wrote of carved trees, haunted grottos, and strange silences. Obviously, that's incredibly familiar to anyone who's read the series.
Yeah, that is.
It's just
Children of the
Forest. Yeah, it's like
all
straight up, all just like them. Whether there's some differences, I could believe it depending on when they diverged. There could be significant differences, but essentially that's what they are.
Yeah, they're at least cousins.
At least cousins. You could see that they could be slightly different.
Carved trees, haunted grottos, strange silences, all of that. What do you think, LML? This is very cool. Sea Snake must have been. He probably made the connection too of hearing about the old gods, and he went north to Hardhome and Eastwatch and all that. So,
yeah, you start to wonder if Sea Snake is like maybe in the cult of Starry Wisdom or the Illuminati or something. He's going to a lot of magical places here. I'm just kind of tinfoiling, obviously, I'm having fun, but it's interesting. It's probably just George using the Sea Snake as exposition. Like there's only 1 or 2 people that have ever been to some of these places. So if George needs to talk about the Ifakevron, then this is a convenient way to do it. There's probably no important thing for Corlys Velaryon, the fact that he goes here, but I don't know. I do wonder, his son, quote unquote, or possibly, grandson, Adam Velaryon, goes to the Isle of Faces on his dragon before going to Tumbleton. So there is kind of this idea of these Velaryons going to these interesting places. I actually think that's because of symbolism. The seahorse and the Velaryon ships are vehicles for a lot of green seer symbolism, which is too complicated for me to even try to explain right now. But there's a lot of green seer stuff going on, and so that's why I think they're going to places like Lang and this Ifakevron forest. But let me drop a little something else on you here. So they're called some say that the a densely wooded vanished forest dwellers, they were called the woods walkers. Is that in this paragraph, or is
It's
that
not in
another
this paragraph,
different
but they
paragraph,
are
yeah.
called that, yes.
So what's interesting is they sound like children of the forest, but woods walkers sounds like the White Walkers, because the full name for the White Walkers is White Walkers of the Wood. So even in the description of the Epicevron, George is dropping us clues that the White Walkers are related to the children of the forest.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And there's that the part of the quote that says, or fled to other lands, which makes sense that they could have moved to Westeros, or, you know, this could have been, this not could have been, it was when Westeros and Essos were connected by what's now the
Maybe they
Stepstones.
stowed away in Sea Snake's hold, and they went into the hard home. Let's keep going.
That's good. I also want to point out the not point out, but refer to your comment about Adam Velaryon going to Isle of Faces, which is just kind of odd. Like, why would he go? Like, where did he get the idea to go there in the first place? And I like that, drawing the line to this and seeing that, yeah, there's at least some Velaryon connection to that. You never know. Maybe Corlys told Adam something.
Yeah, that actually is a very practical way of looking at it. Like, why did this random Velaryon dragon rider, or bastard turned Velaryon dragon rider, think to fly to the friggin' Isle of Faces, which is normally protected by sorcery and fog and shit like that?
Yeah,
I mean, it's kind of crazy.
He's like, I know, I'll go to the Isle of Faces. What gave him that idea? Like, why? Where did that come from? Like, where was the impetus for that? Yeah.
So yeah, maybe you could picture Corlys, you know, telling stories to his newfound recognized and legitimized children or grandchildren, Alan and Adam.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe they did hear about the Epicevron or some of these other magical places like Lang and Asshai, and it at least nurtured a curiosity and a knowledge that magic is real. Perhaps, you know, he probably wasn't a magic skeptic after all these voyages.
No, I wouldn't think so. And you wonder too, just referring to the dragon, you know, this is comes so much later in his life, but what he knew about dragons from his travels and his readings and everything, and he might know a few things that even the Targaryens had known or didn't know or had forgotten. Because there is a lot of evidence that the Targaryens didn't carry all their dragon knowledge with them. You know, they didn't have horns anymore, things like that. So, and the way they treated eggs differently, all that. So, let's move on. We have a map of Nefer, which is another really cool, creepy
This is a map
place.
that has Nefer and
Not just Nefer.
the kingdom of Epicevron on it, obviously.
Yeah, a lot of these different spots.
Fair, home of Neferion, one of the 5 names for Azor Ahai.
Yeah. So we have another very cool quote here. This one's so long. We'll each read a part of it. We'll just read the first half, this first chunk first, and we'll talk about this pod.
I can read it if you want.
Yeah, go. You do this first one. Yeah, sure.
All right, so beyond the Ibish coastlands and forests of the Epicevron, the foothills of the Bones rise up out of the grasslands, and farther east the mountains themselves march down to meet the sea. Even from miles out into the shivering sea, the great northern peaks, with their icy crowns and jagged spires, seem to split the very air. Krasaj Zaska, the Dothraki call the northernmost of the Bones, the White Mountains. Beyond them lies another world, one that very few Westerosi has ever visited. Those who have come this far, like Lomas Longstrider, have come by land through the mountain passes, or by way of the warm southern waters and the Jade Gates. Though the eastern waters of the Shivering Sea are as rich as those of the west, few come to fish them save the Ibbenese themselves, for beyond the Bones are found the lands of the nomadic Jogos Nhai, a savage race of mounted warriors with no ships and no interest in the sea. Translation, no interest in money.
Big difference there. Well,
Whalers from the port of Ibn regularly hunt Leviathan Sound, where those great beasts come to mate and birth their young, and they're talking about whales there. And Ibbenese fishermen speak of vast schools of cod in the deeper waters, seals and walrus on the rocky islands to the north, and spider crabs and emperor crabs everywhere. But elsewise, these eastern seas are empty.
Yeah, so that's really cool. And you wonder, just if we talk about the description of some of these places, that Corlys maybe doesn't have. This is an area where he maybe doesn't have any sources to have explained what these places are to him. And I wonder, we're told that he's the first person to visit a lot of these places. I wonder if George is riffing a little bit off of our own history, meaning U.S. history, where we're told that Columbus discovered the Americas, but that's not really true. Accepting the fact that people already lived here, so you don't discover a place people already lived, but Vikings certainly found it well before Columbus did. That's proven beyond a shadow of doubt these days. It wasn't always so
not
certain.
Even the first white guy.
Yeah, not even the first white people. Yeah. So you wonder if this little bit of that is in place too. There might have been somebody that had come to some of these places well before the Sea Snake, but because he's so famous and he wrote everything down, and because he's a powerful guy that his books would have been copied and all that, and because he did so much trading and brought back so much wealth, and so many other people were with him, more people to spread the story of being with him, whereas somebody who just went to these places and never wrote it down, like how would anybody even know, you know? It wouldn't be caught up in history books if it was never written down in the first place. So I don't think we're meant to believe that literally he was the first Westerosi to go to some of these places, but rather the first person to record that or that we know of. Well, let's continue with the quote here.
Next one for me.
Yeah.
Still farther east lie the so-called Thousand Islands. Ibonese chart makers tell us that there are, in truth, fewer than 300, a sea-girt scatter of bleak, wind-swept rocks believed by some to be the last remnants of a drowned kingdom, whose towns and towers were submerged beneath the rising seas many thousands of years ago. Only the boldest or the most desperate mariners ever make landfall here, for the people of these islands, though few in number, are a queer folk, inimical to strangers, a hairless people with green-tinged skin who file the teeth of their females into sharp points and slice the foreskins from the members of their males. They speak no known tongue and are said to sacrifice sailors to their squamous, fish-headed gods, likenesses of whom rise from their stony shores, visible only when the tide recedes. Though surrounded by water on all sides, these islanders fear the sea so much that they will not set foot in the water even under threat of death.
Probably means they don't ever leave either. For that reason, you wouldn't get into a ship. They're even more afraid of the sea than the Dothraki.
So this is a really aggressive statement against male circumcision by George Martin.
It is an aggressive statement, and it also tells me now that I guess I should picture every man in Westeros and Essos in general as being uncircumcised, which probably makes sense, but I'd never thought about it.
Me neither.
So,
but you're right. Why would they be circumcised? Yeah. Why would they?
That's the real thing we need to be railing against HBO against. Why have we not?
But all kidding aside, what's going on here is pretty obvious. This is a case of the Squishers coming out of the sea and raping the ancestors of these people, and so it leaves them fish-like, but also terrified of the sea. And so it's basically a different way to go. This is just yet more proof that Squishers and Merlings are real. We find fishy people in a few places. The Iron Islands have their legends about, Merlings and Squishers. Mm-hmm. And here it's like one of the best evidences of, the sea folk are always coming out of the sea to mate with humans. Sometimes it's nice, sometimes it's not nice.
You think that's specifically why they file the teeth of their women? Like maybe they don't realize now that that's where that tradition comes from, but that they might have been doing it specifically to try to turn off and like defend against the Squishers. So
women could bite these men that came for them from the sea.
Yeah.
And so they have gods that look like, Squishers that are carved in stone. And so you almost wonder if, like in the past, maybe they were more powerful and more connected to their Squisher, fathers, and now they're just like terrified of them. But something bad and Lovecraftian went on there, as you can see.
And absolutely, super Lovecrafty. This reference, this is very. Not even subtle how much it is Lovecrafty.
And in fact, Cheesecloth is pointing out that the Squishers are said to have sharp, pointy teeth.
Yeah.
So basically, they're filing their teeth so they look like they're Squisher gods.
But like, it just doesn't make exact sense to me. Like maybe with the idea that they were specifically changed by the squishers, you have to say that okay, now they're completely embracing it, and like, would they welcome it now if a squisher came? Would they be like?
No, it's like one of those things where they fear and worship at the same time, sort of.
So like, but like, if it was like a squisher came and chose a woman, would they be like, oh, she's so lucky, or would they still be?
I think they would be like Craster, more like, okay, take it, but please leave the
yeah,
rest of us alone.
Wondering
Yeah,
about
take
what
as few of us as
is.
Yeah, that's probably something more like that. You could see them sacrificing to the squishers to keep them appeased or something.
The offerings to the sea, very very old school. Instead of to the tree, offer to the sea.
Squish, squish.
So there's a lot of creepiness there, and you got to wonder, like, Sea Snake would have had some things to write about these people. And here's where the quote continues. I'll read this part. Even Corlys Velaryon dared sail no farther east than the Thousand Islands. This was where the Sea Snake turned back on his great northern voyage. In truth, there was no reason for him to continue, save for his hunger to learn what lay beyond the next horizon. That seems like reason enough to me. Anyway, even the fish taken from these eastern seas are oddly misshapen, with a bitter, unpleasant taste, it is said. Only one port of note is to be found on the shivering sea east of the Bones, Nefer, chief city of the kingdom of Nagai, hemmed in by towering chalk cliffs and perpetually shrouded in fog. When seen from the harbor, Nefer appears to be no more than a small town, but it is said that 9/10 of the city is beneath the ground. For that reason, travelers call Nefer the secret city. By any name, the city enjoys a sinister reputation as a haunt of necromancers and torturers. Okay, so LML, help me out here. This is something that's kind of confused me a little bit. Maybe you have an answer. Okay, the Jogos Nagai. How does the Jogos Nagai culture end in a city of necromancers and torturers? That to me is a little strange.
Well, no, the Nagai is not the Jogos Nai.
Okay,
that's
no wonder. That's just a similar naming convention. Okay.
Yeah, it is. So the people, it's a former kingdom called Nefer, that's now shrunken down to one city. And the reason why they're shrunken down probably is the Jogos Nai, because the Jogos Nai make war on everybody else around them, whether it's Herkun, which they've already destroyed essentially, or the Yitish, or anybody else. So that's the feeling that I get, is that part of the reason why Nefer is a former kingdom is probably due to those warlike Jogos Nai. There's a lot of AI. I mean, even Asshai, Marahai, there's a lot of AI suffixes in that area.
Yeah, for sure. That's probably why I thought they were more related. The namings are very similar. Okay, well that's a perfect explanation.
And I think the point of George making Nefer all twisted and horrible is because the only reason it's ever important is because it's one of the places that one of the names of Azor Ahai comes from. And when you look at all the places that the 5 Azor Ahai names come from, you start seeing a lot of dark magic, and it's one of the clues about who Azor Ahai really was, which is a bad guy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's cool. It definitely fits really well, and it's also just really cool. Of course, Nefer. It sounds
nefarious.
It does.
No.
It does sound nefarious. Ding, 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 ding. So this is a remnant of something much larger. But less, more of a remnant than what we saw in the Thousand Islands, where it seems like those people are maybe even devolved from some greater civilization that has long fallen. Whereas there's still some hint of civilization here, even though it's pretty dark. The quote continues. Back to you, Ashaya.
Back to me. Okay. Beyond Nagai are the forests of Masovi, a cold, dark land of shape changers and demon hunters. Beyond Masovi, no man of Westeros can truly say. Certain septons have claimed that the world ends east of Masovi, giving, I keep wanting to say Masovi. I didn't settle on that before I said it. I feel like it should be more like the Russian saying,
it
but
sounds
I don't
like
know.
Russian. Yeah.
Whatever. Giving way to a realm of mists, then a realm of darkness, and finally a realm of storm and chaos where sea and sky become as one. Sailors and singers and other dreamers prefer to believe that the shivering sea goes on, unending, past the easternmost coasts of Essos, past islands and continents unknown, uncharted and undreamed of, where strange peoples worship strange gods beneath stranger stars. Wiser men suggest that somewhere beyond the waters that we know, East becomes west, and the shivering sea must surely join the sunset sea, if indeed the world is round. It may be so, or not, until some new sea snake arises to sail beyond the sunrise. No man can know for certain.
That's really cool.
There's a little "I am no man" going on there.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
I almost made a comment on that. I was like, "I'm a woman."
So, any thoughts on Masovi or any of those spots? This is his third voyage of 9 voyages to Essos. So he's gone all this way on only his third voyage. So cool.
Yeah, so I think he hit the end of profitability. Let's put it that way. Like after a certain, I mean, it's a long way. When you look at that map along the north there, it's a long way to the Thousand Islands. So at a certain point, you're like, well, do you want to keep going? You're like, I don't know. The last places that we've been to haven't been that great. I think it's maybe time to go home now. So
even the fish tastes weird here.
Right. And then he started trying the Summer Sea and the Jade Sea, and that's where he really hit it big. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
He just exhausted this sort of line of exploration. But it is, I got to go in about 5 minutes, Aziz.
Cool. Well, that's we should be able to wrap up or close to wrap up. That's about our target.
Cool.
One thing we wanted to keep you around, wanted to make sure we got to hear from you on is this guessing portion of the episode. Oh, look, we have Koja on screen. The very rare appearance of Koja. Oh, that didn't last.
No, she wanted attention, but not to be on camera.
She's a Summer Islander kitty, so we had to try to get her on
Koja
screen.
Mew. Anyways, had to try.
So voyages 4 through 8. My guess is that some of them were repeat voyages to just get more wealth the same way he got tons of wealth the first time. But there's a lot of places that he didn't go that he might have gone that we could dream on. We mentioned Sithorios. We mentioned Sithorios. The west coast of Sithorios or the east coast of Sithorios, Basilisk Isles. There's no mention, like you said earlier, there's no mention of him going there. And we can see why he would avoid it because it's deadly. But maybe he did. Ulthos. We got a map of Ulthos right here. We don't know of anyone ever going there, but it's right there near Asshai. And if he went to Asshai, maybe he went to Ulthos. However, it is explicitly stated that the sea snake never went as far as the Saffron Straits. So that definitely casts a strong shadow on that theory. Now, Ulthos is kind of lined up with Asshai, so he could have gone there without going to the Saffron Straits, but it looks like a no. What do you think, LML? Any thoughts on that?
Those trees look dark and scary.
They really do. Something up with those trees. It's a darker jungle than anywhere else on the map.
I know. I just think here we see the difference between him and Alyssa Farman. Alyssa Farman's always trying to go further, go further, go further. And Sea Snake is like counting his money at a certain point. He's like, let's go home.
And Slaver's Bay would be another possibility for a place he might have gone. We've got a map shot of that as well, but maybe he didn't bother because the slave trade there's not as much money in the slave trade as there is in these regular trade goods, setting aside the obvious ethical considerations. But yeah, it's just I don't think there's as much money in that. And slavery is not legal in Westeros anyway, so he would have to be selling slaves from slave city to slave city. What's that?
What year was it made illegal?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I guess it was along with the Andals. I mean, it was probably...
Yeah, I guess so.
You know?
Yeah, I guess you're right. They were escaping specifically, like, we don't want to be part of this slavery.
Yeah, so I guess it's just been kind of they've always been against it and just always been sort of taboo. Maybe not illegal, but now it's illegal. But before it was just taboo.
Yeah, you would have pictured when they had all these hundreds of, kingdoms and stuff like that. Some people would be like, I'm having slaves. I don't care. I was never a slave. I don't have any reason not to have them.
Yeah. Other places he could have gone besides Slaver's Bay, the other side of Westeros, a parallel Ice Wolf attempt on the other side of the cold area. But there's no indication he did that since we here only did 2 voyages on the Ice Wolf. So it's kind of unlikely he tried to find a different passage on the other side of the continent using the Sea Snake and not the Ice Wolf. North of Ib, what's up there? South of the Summer Isles, what's down there? Nath, he would know that Nath isn't a place you could stay very long, but maybe given he was well read, he could maybe know that you could stop there for a minute and get out before the butterflies get you. But that might be too risky. Any other places? Is there anything we didn't name as far as places he could go that we weren't able to?
No, I think we've already We've already explained it.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I don't think he has much reason to go very inland,
Yeah.
all things considered.
Sorry, Asshai. And he's also got no reason to go anywhere where he doesn't know where there's going to be something on the other end. Like, he's not going to go striking out south of the Summer Isles, because why do that?
Yeah.
He could die. Like,
But yeah, I don't
guaranteed
see a reason.
welfare. He's not going to Sothorios.
Yeah, I don't see a reason for him to go to Norvos or,
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Yeah, he's going to places where he can make money, or where the Starry Wisdom cult wants him to go.
A couple of right. That's the hidden hand is guiding him, right? Super chats from Holly Waldron, 1 of 2. Based on your episode about the Great Empire of the Dawn and House Dane connection, do y'all think Dany's mom could be a Shara with Brandon? And part 2, Jon thinks he's a Bastard Stark, but is actually a true Targaryen, and Dany thinks she's a true Targaryen, but is actually a Bastard Stark. Yeah, I mean, the symmetry there is pretty cool, but the timelines do not support this possibility at all.
And the looks, to be honest with you, Ashara Dane mixed with Brandon Stark does not Daenerys Targaryen make, realistically speaking. Like,
There's
maybe
no silver hair there.
Maybe, like, in our genetics, it's maybe possible, but, like, George doesn't write it like that, really. So, and it's still unlikely. Yeah, in general, dark hair plus dark hair, even with one of them having violet eyes, is a problem.
And we've been shown too many times that the dark hair overrides the fair looks. But
so I think that's the one of the biggest issues.
Yeah.
To be
so
honest.
I'd have to say it's a cool idea, but no, I don't think so. I don't think it's supported. So LML has to go in a second. Let's finish this last voyage, and then we'll say goodbye to you. And then after you
I
go,
actually have to go right
now.
now.
Okay, let's say
Perfect.
do your tell everyone where to find you, and we'll catch you next time.
Well, lucifermeanslightbringer.com, Lucifer Means Lightbringer website, and find me on Sundays at 3 Eastern doing the pregame live stream. We're going to do our first pregame live stream this week early, get all the Mythhead predictions set up for the season, and then we'll be there, premiere day, 3 Eastern, and then we'll also be doing the post game after the show. So
Great.
Come check it out. Make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel. When I checked earlier today, I was just a couple of subscribers away from 11,111. So you could be the lucky 111111 subscriber.
1-1's older brother. 1-1 and his older brother. 1-1.
Wound dar wound.
Cool.
So that's it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm at 11,109. So
cool. All right, everybody, help him get there. And thanks for coming. Great insights, and we will talk to you during Game of Thrones season.
Peace.
Bye.
All right. Okay, yeah, we're not done here. We've got several more things to discuss. We have the 9th voyage, and we also have his settling down. We have a little bit of stuff written about his when he's done with his voyages, and that includes some more artwork. So we're definitely going to get to that.
Mm-hmm.
So his 9th voyage, like I said, with the 4th through 8th voyages, all we have is his guesswork that we've just been through. And the 9th voyages was another trip to Karth. 20 ships loaded with gold. Karth, buying spices, elephants, silk. 6 of the ships didn't make it. The elephants died, but still vastly wealthy from the venture. My headcanon here is this is why Oakenface made a big deal out of... And the elephant, don't forget the elephant, because his father/grandfather was unable to bring elephants that he planned to bring. I wonder what his plans were with those elephants. Was he going to use them as weapons of war, or...
He was going to build his own palace of ivory.
That's right. It's in his own words that it was actually a palace of ivory, so it sounds like it's not an exaggeration, but damn, it's like a palace of ivory.
Well, yeah,
Whoa.
you can see on the screen this art from Drafturgy that shows the elephants being loaded onto the ships. Obviously, they didn't make it, but then you can see Corlys on his driftwood crown. I will not say driftwood clown, as Aziz has said in the past.
You mean driftwood throne?
Yes.
Yes,
You're
I have
right.
said driftwood clown.
See, I was just thinking about it as I was saying it. I was like, all I could think about was when you said driftwood clown. I was like, I'm not going to say it. And then of course.
So he took a substantial amount of this money and built himself a new castle, which of course is not a cheap thing to do. And he didn't exactly go about it using budget construction materials either. So Asshai, please read this one for us.
Oh, all right. The seat of House Velaryon was Castle Driftmark, a dark, grim place, always damp and often flooded. Lord Corlys raised a new castle on the far side of the island, High Tide was built of the same pale stone as the Eyrie, its slender towers crowned with roofs of beaten silver that flashed in the sun. When the morning and evening tides rolled in, the castle was surrounded by the sea, connected to Driftmark proper only by a causeway.
So it sounds a little bit like a combination of with the Erie marble. It's like the Erie combined with River Run.
Yeah.
With a silver roof?
Yeah.
Come on.
It sounds like it would be blinding to look at out in the day, like
Yeah,
with the sea and the reflected of the silver. I just be like, ah.
You may not have thought of that. Yeah.
Just-
Don't polish
their
the
enemies
roof.
can never attack when it's sunny.
Just blind them. Yeah.
To this new castle, Lord Corlys moved the ancient driftwood throne, a gift from the Merling king, according to legend. The sea snake built ships as well. The royal fleet tripled in size during the years he served the old king as master of ships. Even after giving up that office, he continued to build, turning out merchantmen and trading galleys in place of warships. Beneath the dark, salt-stained walls of Castle Driftmark, 3 modest fishing villages grew together into a thriving town called Hull, for the rows of ship hulls that could always be seen below the castle. Along the island, near high tide, another village was transformed into Spice Town, its wharves and piers crowded with ships from the free cities and beyond. Sitting athwart the gullet, Driftmark was closer to the narrow sea than Duskendale or King's Landing, so Spice Town soon began to usurp much of the shipping that would elsewise have made for those ports, and House Velaryon grew ever richer and more powerful.
Yes, this is what we were talking about earlier with him, the trickle-down stuff and him building his island really big and creating opportunities for a lot of people and just getting more and more wealthy by making all the right moves. And you got to figure there was some animosity maybe from some of these other spots that were losing out on business because the ascendancy of House Velaryon, who were somewhat upstarts to the area. You know, like some of these houses have been in place for thousands of years, and the Velaryons maybe they're an ancient family, but not ancient in this area because obviously they migrated from Valyria. The Driftwood Throne, really cool, evocative image there. I'm glad we got that included in Drafturgy's art. Very good shot there. And the city, the town of Hull, named for its rows of ships always being built, and then the name of Spice Town, that is also very straightforward. A town where there's a lot of spices being traded, which makes sense. That would make it really rich, given what we discussed about how expensive spices are, and if Corlys had arranged trade routes with some of these places he went, then the spice would flow. Hey, it's a Dune reference. Spice must flow. So we have part of his settling down is marrying Rhaenys in AC 90.
Yeah, you can see this art again.
Yeah. Now, we know he was an ambitious guy. So this marriage had definitely some things beyond just I'm marrying this awesome Targaryen princess. There's more to it than that. She insisted on arriving to their marriage, to their wedding on Meleys, the Red Queen. That's pretty badass.
Yeah.
It's like, you may have ships and fleets and wealth, but you don't have this. We're not starting off our marriage on unequal footing. And she gets pregnant in 92, and Aemon dies. That's the heir to the throne, dying in 92. And Rhaenys is passed over for Baelon, and this is when, in that quote, it's referenced that Corlys left the office of Master of Ships.
Yeah, because they're fools. They're damn fools.
Damn fools.
You could have Rhaenys and Corlys Velaryon as king and queen. Like, all this civil unrest just would be hardly anything.
A big part of our Dance of the Dragons coverage is talking about what a big mistake this was. Because, yeah, you don't, as we just took great lengths to show y'all, the Sea Snake was incredibly powerful. And by Jaehaerys passing over Rhaenys, he pissed off the Sea Snake. And that would have a huge ripple effect, not just on the Sea Snake, but on other factions.
The House Velaryon in general, for sure.
Jaehaerys, great king, but he did a lot to set up the Dance of the Dragons. His descendants didn't just hit the accelerator on that, but but he did start it. And then Laena is the one who was born of that first child born of Corlys and Rhaenys, and she was passed over as well. And then Laenor was born, and he was passed over. So again, that's kind of outside the scope of this episode, but I just wanted to throw it out there so we know, just to kind of set the table for our dance coverage. let's talk a little bit more about high tide. We've got this awesome shot of it. So cool looking. You can really get the sense of what I meant when I said it's a bit like River Run. When the tide comes in, it's cut off from the mainland except for a narrow causeway, which would make it super, super hard to assault. Mm-hmm. However,
I like the little detail of Meleys, you assume, up there flying.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, little dragon touch is nice. We don't know exactly when it was built, but it was prior to 106. We know that much because it was there. It existed in 106, so it had to have been built before that. That quote about slender towers crowned with roofs of shining silver. I know I already commented on that, but damn, that is so baller.
Mm-hmm. And you can also see a map shot just so you can see the location of Driftmark in relation to Dragonstone and whatnot.
And another factor in him building High Tide was that the ancestral seat built prior, when the Velaryons first came to Driftmark, was, quote, damp and crowded. And you hear that in a few other castles, that someone made a new castle because the other one was damp, and that causes like health issues. I believe the Harlaws did the same thing, if I remember correctly. So one of the purposes of this place was not only house the Driftwood Throne, but to house all these other treasures that he accumulated. It was almost like a safe, he needed a better vault to hold all his insane wealth. And as we talked earlier, all these people coming to migrate there, all these villages building up, this was a source of manpower. And, well, thorough art is thorough. Drafturgy has given us an art of Valyrian soldiers, and I love the detail here. You got the spear, you got the shield, you got some of the sigil in there.
Cool kind of scaled-ish, don't know, armor at the top, I don't know, it's a little nautical looking, like with the spears and all.
Light armor. It was very a good take on how I think it would look, because that's very true. Only weirdos like Victarion wear heavy armor on ships. Most of them are like Davos, who wear light armor, and the only heavy thing is their helmet, which they can just pop right off if they fall in the water. So he's lord of those guys now. Those are his men, and he wants to have lots of them. Well, since we're not covering his politics and his time as a politician and leader and general and all that, this is about where the coverage ends, because once he's built his castle, once he's established himself, once he's got his princess, his queen who never was, a dragon, a son riding a dragon, his life is a much, much different thing. So that's why we're covering it separately. So this is where we're going to end things today, but I do want to I do have a list of a summary of his life that includes some things during this political war era of his latter life, just to give a nice summary of how amazing he was. Okay. Married a dragon rider. He's the first Velaryon to have a Velaryon son ride a dragon, because before it was Targaryens, right? He crowned a king of the Stepstones, that's Daemon Targaryen, and he poisoned another, Aegon II. The following titles were all his: Sir, Lord of the Tides, Lord Regent, Hand of the Queen, Master of Ships, Master of Driftmark, Blacks and the Greens, Velaryon, and Valyrian. So he fought for both the Blacks and the Greens and the Velaryon, and he was Valyrian. But he wasn't a guy that just switched sides due to opportunism. He was always focused on peace. So his name, Sea Snake, is a bit misleading. And he differs from some of those. We talk a lot about in this episode how he differs from a lot of the other explorer types like Lomas and even his own grandson / son, Alan. But I just want to remind you all of that he's very different. And eventually Rhaenys marries back into her grandmother's family, which is, kind of comes full circle with that all, with that whole thing. Because when she marries Corlys, well, Corlys is related to other people that she's related to. So it's, more of this, everyone's related business. We have a note from Mr. Begavita, who is the real-life parallel to Corlys. I don't know.
I think we want to ask that of our listeners.
Yeah, if you guys have
let us know who you think.
Yeah, if you have a suggestion, definitely, like Asshai said, let us know. There's definitely some interesting explorer figures who have maybe parts of him, but I don't know one that's a great one-to-one relationship. So that's something for y'all to maybe hit us with if you have one. If anyone gets us a good one, then we will let y'all know, and we will post that in a later episode. So let us do our thanks and outro. Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's sorry we couldn't get this done last week, but obviously...
We will be off next week.
That's right.
But we will have a live stream that Saturday the 13th, and I think you said 2 p.m. Eastern, right?
That's right, 2 p.m. Eastern, which would be 6 GMT.
So we'll post the event for that pretty soon because we don't have a stream before then.
Yep, 7 GMT. Now, there is a chance we do another stream before that, and that will be if there's another trailer. We got some new teasers, but that's not really enough to do a full episode on. But if there's a full new trailer or a substantial amount of new footage, we will do an episode prior to Saturday the 13th. But otherwise, that's our next live stream, Saturday the 13th. And then we're full in Game of Thrones mode for 6 weeks. And then we'll let y'all know what comes after that. So let's say thanks to a few people. Do our patron shout-outs. Thanks to Asshai, of course. Thanks to Michael Klarfeld.
Thanks to Drafturgy.
Big thanks to Drafturgy.
Yes, as we said, go follow him on Twitter and Instagram at Drafturgy. And we hope to get more art from him in the future. And we will certainly be linking to his online store so you can buy a print. I know I sure want a print of that.
Yeah, I do too. And we will certainly be spreading the word as we get more information and helps let y'all find this wherever it can be found. Okay. And also thanks to LML for being a part of this episode. Very helpful.
No, screw him. Yes. He left early.
That's why we wanted to have him leave so we could make fun of him once he left. Okay. Thanks to our other patrons. Thanks to Lord Mark of House Joseph, the Snow and Winterfell, rider of Mazla Cartho, a white dragon with green scales, horns, wings, and talons. Jinx of House Lier is Green Queen of the Rainwood, rumored daughter of a woods witch, rider of Erogenia, a sylphic albino dragon with amethyst eyes and opalescent wings. The mysterious BR is Hand of the King. The Smiling Wolf is Lord Stephen Stark of the Broken Tower, soldier, scholar, philosopher, diplomat, Hand of Queen Asshai, who is known as the best. Mm-hmm. Lord Jim the Fortuitous of Wars and Politics of Ice and Fire blog is Warden of the West. Another person that will be seeing at Ice and Fire Con. Lord George Stormsville the Cunning, Lord of the Chiliad and Warden of the East. Kabeth the Unfrozen, Lord of the Bricks and Castle Crimson Light, Defender of the Old Gods, and Warden of the North. I believe that's another person we'll be seeing at Ice and Fire Con.
Oh, yeah, he goes to a lot of those.
Yeah. Lady Kelly McMath of Covington, Lady of the Villa Hills and Crescent Springs, is Warden of the South. Lord James Tuttle is King of the Stepstones and the Narrow Sea, commander of the Royal Fleet, consisting of the Narrow Fleet led by flagship Caraxes and the Bloodstone Fleet led by flagship Prince Daemon. We also have a new King beyond the wall. He was one of our lords, but he has set aside his seat, formerly known as Lord Sidney Jesse the Fallborn, Lord of Blue Spring. He has now become the King beyond the wall, and he has celebrated his ascendancy over the free folk by having himself forged a blade of pure dragon glass that is as sharp as it sounds, and you do not want to face him with that. Also, thanks to our small council, the Lord Daniel the Sneaky Russian is Master of Ships, Grand Maester Voyages, Lord Benjamin of House Hornwood is Master of Laws, Lord Fabian Flowers is the Bastard of Greenshield, Master of Coin, and Lord Johann of House Orcos is called Shadowhawk, Master of Whisperers. Our lords and ladies in their castles include Lady Direliz of Castle Naki, the Alpha Patron, Lord Dan of the Red Mountains and Castle Great Bell is Breaker of the Second Stone, Lord Skip of the Veldt is Lord of Castle Ganges, Gregor the Toasty is Lord of the Breadfort, Alicia Everlasting of the Green Blood is Lady of Desert Rose. Lord Ryan of Castle Stonegate is Guardian of the Rocky Mountain Pass. Lord Garin de Haviland is of Devil's Hand Keep. Ashlyn Winter is the Hawk's Eye, Lady of Castle Skyfall. Lady Mikkel of Moonacre is Leader of the Werewood Protectorate Alliance. Lord of the Halls of Castle Hillcrest is Wielder of the Valyrian Steel Machete Everglazed. Lord Alistair Whitaker is Lord of the Dawnhold. Lord Bemmy Snugglebunny is Guardian Ranger of the Hidden 100-Acre Werewood, dual wielder of the Valyrian short swords Glorious Morning and Little Light Wise, sharpshooter of the Werewood and Ironwood laminated longbow, Todd Von Oben. Brian the Defender is Lord of the Spearfort and the Freelands, last scion of Clan McCulloch, Strength and Courage. The Bastard of the Wolfswood is First Forester of the Old Gods, Sworn to House Iron Werewood, Listen for the Silence. Connor the Dungeon Master is Lord of Catamount Keep and Guardian of the Smoky Mountain Pass. Lady Baelish is Dark Widow of Harrenhal. Nevesta the Twin-Hearted is a suspected skin changer and holder of Castle Carahelm. Sir Valentin of House of Jen is creator of the free Game of Thrones predictions futures market. Lady Liana Kelly is of Wolf Island and protectress of the Steelhold. Casey Stark is of House Acres. Lady Kay of House Archer is Lady of Earthdog Hall, Huntress of the Wolfswood, and Guardian of Maddie Squirrel's Bane, the mighty Direweenie. Lady Raywin of House Dillsdane is the Star Spear. And Peter Rivers, the Pale Dragon, is heir to Bloodraven. Also, thanks to King's Justice, Sir Troy the Steady, wielder of the Valyrian steel blade Fate.
And thanks to the Queen's High Council, led by, with Bloody Ben Blackwood, Master of Whisperers, Rebea Star Eyes, Lady of Waves and Mistress of Ships, Captain of the Iron Shadow Cat. In the shadows we bear our claws. Laura of House Brondos is Master of Coin. Grand Maester Elizabeth, middle daughter of Lyanna Mormont, First Lady to forge both the Silver and Valyrian Steel Link, and Dennis of Lazar, Embar Persis, former head of the Cell Sail Company, the Fiery Shepherds, Master of Laws.
Yeah, the Embar Perseus is High Valyrian for Fire of the Sea.
Oh,
pretty cool. I like that name
is
a lot.
cool.
Our King's Guard is led by Lord Commander Miriamar and backed up by Sir Dolorous D, longest tenured White Sword. Wella Crowsbane, Guardian of White Tree, First Lady of the Free Folk. Sir Dean the White, Knight of the Black Star. Sir Jord of House Pepsi, called the Beverage Knight. Gregor Snow, called Snow Bear, a bastard of Winterfell.
Jord of House Pepsi better not come to Atlanta.
Yeah, this is Coke country.
The Queen's Guard is led by Lord Captain Commander Haema Helmint, the Sellsword Sentinel. It has Alexander of House Atreides from the Seat of Dune. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Becca the Bard, Songbird of the North. Michonne the Melodious, Star of Old Town, Minds Over Masters. Ser Rambo, Knight of House Gannon, First Blood. Ser Leon of House Walker, wielder of the twin Valyrian steel blades, Fire and Ice, and the werewood bow, Rain. And last but not least, Amber the Adamant, the Knight of the Mist and Mother of Squids.
Lord Commander George the Golden leads the Beard Guard, backed up by Sir Joshua Oakhart, the White Oak, Lady Rita of the Coppermane, the Unbound, Dance the Fervor, Sir Jeff Warden of the AC, wielder of Triad, the multifaceted Beard of Platinum, Red and Brown, Stay Frosty. Sir Tim Corgyle is Mad Boy of the Western Desert, and Queen Helena von Landstein is partying like it's 1999 since 1980-something. A kingdom for a drink. And finally, our History of Westeros and Night's Watch is led by Lord Commander Benjen Umber, the Silent Giant, wielder of the Valyrian Steel Greatsword Winter's Kiss. And he is backed up by First Builder Maegor Snow, a.k.a. Maegor the Cool, the Fire in the Snow.
I like that name.
Yeah, it's very cool. First Steward...
Very cool.
I didn't even mean to do that. I pun in my sleep, apparently.
You're awake.
Whoa, I am awake. First Steward Sir Jurion of the Torrentine, called Pale Wind. And First Ranger Sir Source Delica of House Gramercy. Nice audio file reference there. Okay, everybody, thanks again. Thanks to Michael Klarfeld again. Thanks to Drafturgy again. Thanks to LML again. And we will see you guys.
Thanks to Aziz for the first time ever.
Thanks to me. Okay. Thanks to H.P. Lovecraft and Pod City and all of y'all who came to watch and or listen today. We will see you next time. Valar, reread us.